Meeting come back to order on Tuesday, November 9th, 2010. Do we have any report actions taken in closed session?
No, sir.
Approval of the agenda?
Mr. President, members, there was a request by Vanguard representatives. They have if possible, a plane to catch, and they were hoping, instead of being at the end, that we could move them up just after the consent calendar, if that meets with your request.
That's fine.
Okay. Can I get approval for the agenda?
So moved.
First and second, please vote. This is a time for public comment. At this time, you may address the board on items that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of IID, but not an item on the agenda. Those who wish to address the board, come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name's Oscar Gonzalez, and I live here in El Centro, and I've lived here for many years. I would like to basically talk about three things that are not within the purview of the agenda. First of all, it seems to me, after talking to many employees, I have relatives and many friends that I went to school with that are IID employees all over the valley, and they live at various places. After discussing that and analyzing the situation, it seems that they're tired of the disparate treatment and the administrative tyranny that Dr. Brady has succumbed them to. They cannot tolerate the repression of the said regime for over 2 years. IID work is being contracted out. Thus, the IID employees are being laid off at the expense of making contractual arrangements with other outside firms to do their work. Present IID employees are cutting weeds and repairing the work of these usurpers of outside businesses that are doing work that IID once did. I've seen it myself. I visited them out there. You know, there was something in the paper Friday, and there was an opinion. How much time do I have, Anthony?
About 2 minutes left.
Okay. There was an article in the paper Friday, and there was another opinion in the IV Press where the lady from Brawley was quoted as saying that she was not going to allow Dr. Brady to pull the wool over her head, I guess. But you know, the fact of the matter is that Mr. Jim Hanks, Mr. Michael Abadi, Orby Hanks, Mike Morgan have been repeatedly complaining. Of course, Mike Morgan has the money, and he doesn't, I guess he doesn't waste any time, and any time that nobody agrees with him, he'll go ahead and sue because he's got the money. But the fact of the matter is that that lady from Brawley was not the first one. They've been doing, she just woke up. And the issue now is, when is Anthony Sanchez and Mr. Menville, John Pierre Menville, are going to wake up to that fact? You know, it isn't that it just happened overnight. Employees have been complaining about that historically for the last 2 years, and I want to regurgitate that. I would like for the community to see transparency from the point of view of the general manager, transparency in terms of how many surprises are we going to see again. You know, I think what we need, and I think we're all asking because we're part of IID, you know, I know my grandparents, relatives, friends, and uncles have been paying water rates historically, and it seems that it's getting worse. And we would like transparency. We're not asking for too much. We would like Mr. Brady to be part of the home team. We want to welcome him. He said when he got interviewed that he was going to move to Imperial Valley. To date, he hasn't. He leaves on Thursday nights, comes back Monday afternoon. So he doesn't put in 5 days' work. And you know, the other thing that I'm really concerned is the fact that we have a person who's on contract, made over $190,000 plus, more than Mr. Brady, who makes over $240,000 a year. And I think he gets paid, and I'm not complaining about the fact that he's a doctor, the fact that he gets paid all that money. But you know, when he got interviewed, he said that his main thing in his resume was organization. And he, on the other hand, I see a contradiction. I see Mr. Brady hiring consultants to organize IID. So, you know, what's wrong with the picture? You know, and I'm not dumb. I analyze things, and I'm really not into personalities. I'm looking at the substantive of the issue.
All right, Oscar. Hey,
The last point.
okay.
You know, I'd like to recommend for your board to give Mr. Orby Hanks a resolution. I think he did a tremendous job in Calexico, and he may or may not agree with you guys when he comes here and expresses his First Amendment, but I think he's paid his due, regardless of whether he gets following money or doesn't. Hey, farmers have been getting welfare since day one, you know, many years ago, especially in the South. So anyway, those are the only two items that I wanted to highlight and set the record straight that Mr. Hanks and Mr. Abadi have been on the tail of Mr. Brady for 2 years. And it didn't start Friday, and it didn't start this Sunday with that legal opinion or the opinion of the Ivy Press. The Ivy Press does it subtly to divide and polarize the community. But hey, I give thanks to Mr. Hanks and I give thanks to Abadi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. Moving on to, you know what, let us do the flag salute. I'll go ahead and, I forgot to do that at the beginning. I'll go ahead and lead us. If everyone can please stand. Ready to begin?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move on to comments from the board. Director Hanks. Are there any other public comments? All right, comments.
I have nothing to.
Director Menville.
Yes, I will not be going to Colorado River Board meeting tomorrow because Thursday's Veterans Day and the WCAB's been moved to tomorrow, so I'll be attending the WCAB meeting tomorrow instead of going to Colorado River Board. Thank you.
I have no comments. Director Abadi.
Yes, a brief. On April 13th, I asked staff to calculate the impacts of the lost hydro generation on the All-American Canal due to the construction and operations of the drop-to reservoir. I was specifically interested in placing the value on the lost generation as it relates to the district's renewable portfolio standards and the greenhouse gas emissions. I again made this request May 25th and September 14th at board meetings. Finally, I asked the general manager for a status of the report on the outstanding issues during an October 5th meeting and was told the information would be sent to the board the following meeting. I reviewed the report provided to the board but do not believe it addressed how this loss of hydro generation affects the IID's RPS standard requirements or its emission reduction strategy, and it doesn't make the ratepayer whole. So what I'm asking today is renewing my request for this information, which I expect to be provided to the full board at a regular board meeting for discussion without any further delay.
So you would like this agendized so that we can discuss? Absolutely. You did receive the report, and as you may recall, Mr. Abadi, we offered that if you wanted to sit down with myself and staff to...
The report was done December 2009 for some reason. But before I made the request in April. But I don't believe it's what I was... many times I asked, are you comparing it to green prices for replacement? Many times I was told yes. I don't think $75 is going to cut it. And I would like to have a full discussion on this issue.
Sure.
To make the ratepayer whole.
Director Mendoza.
The lady from Brawley has no comment.
All right. Legal.
No comment on the bill?
No comments, Mr. President.
General Manager.
Just to inform the board that I'll be in Washington, D.C. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week for two reasons. One is I'm the vice chair of the Environmental Task Force for the Large Public Power Council, and we'll be talking about cap and trade, greenhouse gas potential legislation. As well, I'll be briefing certain California delegation members about the mitigation water that we are putting in the sea, and so I'll report to you on that as well when I return. Also, I just finished up my 16th of 16 employee meetings. I believe there were probably about 550 of our rank and file employees attended the meetings. They were lively. There was a free flow of information, mostly at me, and so working with Michael Walla, who's put together a master list. We're addressing a number of HR issues, a gamut of issues, and I'd like to bring that back to the board, just for your information, probably in a couple of weeks when we get it all put together, but a very lively discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Presentations. New Visions for Restoring the Salton Sea, presented by Timothy Krantz.
Do you want to? You're going to go with the other one first?
Vanguard's
Well, they said after consent.
after consent.
After consent.
So, Dr. Krantz, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, lady and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to speak to you today after it's been a couple weeks since I addressed the Salton Sea Authority and was requested by Director Mendoza to deliver a similar presentation to this board. And so it's my pleasure to be with you tonight. I know some of you from my long history. I've been the Salton Sea Database Program Director at the University of Redlands for 13 years. Seems like a long time to me now, but in fact, it was 13 years ago that we really started to kick around restoration alternatives for the Salton Sea. I think at that time, under Secretary of Interior Bruce Babbitt, I was, from that point, the longest sitting member on the Salton Sea Science Subcommittee established under Interior Secretary Babbitt's leadership at that time. More recently, I've just returned from a year abroad based in Vienna, where I was a Fulbright, I had a Fulbright appointment promoting environmental technology transfer and policy issues between the United States and the European Union, and between California and Austria, where I was based in Vienna. And it was while working on that assignment that I was inspired by many of the innovative environmental technologies and renewable energy technologies that I was seeing that are in place there, by how they might be applied to a restoration alternative for the Salton Sea, which brings me before you tonight. As you well know, we've been in a holding pattern with regard to Salton Sea restoration activities for the last 5 years. As one of the last gasps of ex-Governor Gray Davis took the decision-making authority away from the local agencies up to Sacramento to review their restoration plans for the Salton Sea. They evaluated 8 or so alternatives, ranging in cost from $5 to $10 billion in their final estimated engineering and construction costs, which today, as you well know, are beyond the possible financing of the federal or state governments in any way. So with that in mind, I think it's time to revisit and take a new look at these Salton Sea restoration activities as they may affect this valley. So we've been, as this board knows better than anyone, the clock is ticking on the QSA, and we are soon to realize some pretty serious consequences of water reductions of inflow into the basin and into the Salton Sea. To give you kind of a primer of some of the basic statistics regarding the sea, it is California's largest lake. at about 370 square miles at its full stand, yet only 51 feet deep. That was then, is now only about 46 feet deep. But in any case, this is equivalent to a football field 1 inch deep in water. So the shallowness of the sea renders it very susceptible to even slight changes of inflow. At its full stand, 227 feet below sea level, evaporation equals the amount of inflow that sustains that at about 1.3 million acre feet per year. As you also probably know, the Salton Sea lies in a closed basin. That is, it drains 7,800 square miles with no outlet to the ocean. Therefore, all the dissolved salts that come into the sea remain there and are left there by evaporation. Of the inflows to the sea, 87% of that comes from, or rather 77% comes into the sea from the Imperial Valley in the New and Alamo River drainages. Another 8% from agricultural drains that drain directly into the sea. Only 7% from the north end at the Whitewater River, and only 3% from rainfall itself. So primarily, the sea is sustained by agricultural runoff. At an evaporation rate of 5.5 feet per year, this leaves 4 million tons per year of salts in the sea, and that's why the sea has become increasingly saline over the last number of decades. So as we fly into the sea, let's take a closer look at what these proposed reductions of inflow will result. So here's the sea at its high stand about 5 years ago, with a surface elevation of 227 feet below sea level. Now the QSA has established the baseline elevation as 235 feet below sea level. So this is what this would look at, and this is about where the sea is today. Now, according to the QSA, we will reduce the inflow by 20,000 acre feet per year. This is cumulative for the next 15 years from when the drawdowns or reductions of inflow started, to 300,000 acre foot reduction of inflow. This will reduce the lake surface elevation to minus 252. And you can see that the exposures are primarily on the southeast end at the New and Alamo River deltas, somewhat a large exposure on the west shore at Salton City, and extending on the east shore up to Bombay Beach, and then at the Whitewater River Delta at the north end. Now, this is according to our the requirements of the QSA. However, with additional reductions of inflow as a result of the Mexicali wastewater treatment, which resulted in 65,000 acre feet further reduction, canal lining, and other activities, not to mention potential climate change and reductions of flows in the Colorado River that are beyond our control, it seems quite likely that a reduction of as much as 500,000 acre feet is likely. At this point, you can see that from the bathymetry of the sea, there are two sub-basins to the sea. There's a north basin and a south basin, separated by a narrow isthmus, if you will, it's hard to say that, across the middle. That's only about 30 feet deep, so it takes about 20 feet off of the total depth at the deeper portions of the basins. At this lake elevation, 140 square miles of lake bottom sediments are exposed. So this is on the order of 90,000 acres. The sea at its full stand, the sea at 300,000 acre foot reduction of inflow, and the sea at 500,000 acre foot reduction. So now let me talk about what that results in terms of the lake bottom exposure. This, at the lower left end of the slide, you can see a windrows. This shows prevailing wind directions and wind speeds. And you can see that the winds primarily come out of the northwest through the Banning Pass and down, but also significantly coming from the southeast on occasion at quite high velocities. These are the chubascos that come off the Gulf of California. These winds will pick up sediments from the exposed lake bed and deposit them on leeward slopes. Now, we've already experienced this occasionally from the 8,000 acres that's exposed today on the south end. This is a dust storm that was photographed from Bombay Beach. It's estimated that as much as 1 million tons of sediments will be deposited on the leeward slopes around the sea each year. These are very fine particles, PM, particulate pollution, 10 microns or even 2.5 microns in size. 10 microns, 7 grains are in the width of a human hair, 10,000 grains in the space of a sugar cube. When you get down to the smaller particles, PM 2.5, these particles, when inhaled into the lungs, can perfuse the lung tissue directly into your bloodstream, carrying with them cadmium, arsenic, selenium, and other compounds that are attached to the dust particles. Now, we've analyzed different restoration alternatives for the sea over the past decade and kicked around every alternative you can think of, such that we've looked at pump-in, pump-out alternatives from the Gulf of California or from the Pacific Ocean, or pumping out into closed basins around the sea to dispose of salts. We've looked at salt evaporation ponds to try to accentuate the removal of salts from the sea, or giant snowblowers, to proposals such as this or this that would propose to maintain a river around the edge of the Salton Sea while the transferred area is in the middle of the sea, such as the U.S. Filters proposal, where they would have a desalination plant discharging a regulated, say, marine saltwater river around the sea basin. And this was the Salton Sea Authority's plan, in my view, the best of the plans that were reviewed by the state. This is their integrated water management plan. It combines, let's see, do I have a pointer? No. It's this one on top. Oh, this one on top. There we go. The Salton Sea Authority's plan combines many features of the other plans. Basically, there would be a geothermal-driven desalination plant here. The brine discharge could be regulated. The salinity, say, that of the Gulf of California, would come into the Salton River and flow into a maintained water body, in this scenario, in the North Basin. You still would have to dispose of the salt that's going into the sea. And so in this scenario, then we have a discharge canal that comes out on the west shore and then meanders down towards the south basin through saline habitat ponds and solar evaporation ponds, concentrating salt as it goes. This maintains a livable, fishable Salton River and a stable water body at the north end. It was asked when I presented this to the Imperial County Board earlier this morning, why the north end? Well, without getting into the politics, basically the human communities on the shore, other than Bombay Beach, are primarily on the north end. And so that seemed to be the priority with the Salton Sea Authority's plan. One thing about the Salton Sea Authority's plan that I would bring to your attention is that this is the boundary of the known geothermal resource area at the southeast end of the sea. This is one of the largest geothermal potential areas in the world, and half of it today is underwater, inaccessible to geothermal resource development. And so with this plan and with the drawdown, it would use this to fully expand the geothermal potential in the known geothermal resource area. So with that in mind, my vision of the Salton Sea is to harness these renewable energy potentials for the basin and use them as an integral part of air quality management and mitigation, such that at the end of the day, we have an energy mecca at the Salton Sea, the revenues from which go to pay for the maintenance and operation of the water management infrastructure that we would build or construct. The first of these obvious potential energy sources is geothermal, which is already developed to the extent of about 650 megawatts of energy down at the southeast end of the sea. And here we see some of those geothermal plants. Altogether, the field is estimated to have about 3 to 5 gigawatts of electrical energy potential. A gigawatt is 1 billion watts. 1 gigawatt is the roughly equivalent to the electricity to power 1 million homes. So 3 to 5 gigawatts is a lot of power, to say the least. We can generate electricity from that, or we can use that energy as a desalination energy source to treat water for municipal use, or say take the tailwater as it gets into the sea itself after it's done its agricultural purpose, treat and distill that water such that we could potentially create a revenue stream, $750 an acre foot, and the price is going up, as you know, times 100,000 acre feet. This would be a source for potentially $75 million a year of annual revenue.
Who is we?
We, the basin. In fact, that's largely you, I would say, as the water brokers for the basin. The brine discharge from desalination operations can be used in something called a salinity gradient solar pond. ORMAT has done a pilot project for 150 kilowatts of this on the Dead Sea in Israel. And the way this works is you have the heavy brine is discharged into the bottom of an 8-foot deep pond. You float lighter, clean, distilled water or fresh water on top, and this acts as a prism. It allows sunlight to penetrate through the clear surface layer into the heavy brine, which collects heat, generating pretty substantial heat temperatures here in the range of 150 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you run this through a heat exchanger and back and generate electricity. So this is how you use your heavy brine discharge from the desalination. It's not just brine waste. You can actually generate still more energy through the saline gradient solar pond type of technology. And this, together with potential salinity or saline habitat ponds, you could actually distill the water from saline habitat ponds. This is really good habitat mitigation, and actually run that and clean that water using the salinity gradient solar pond energy to the tune of about 1 megawatt of power per 40 acres of ponds. And you rotate, each 40-acre pond is divided into 4 10-acre cells, and you rotate the heat exchange between these 4 cells. So if we devoted just 10,000 acres, that's 1/10 of the exposed lake bed, to this type of technology, we could generate 250 megawatts of power. As you well know, we're also rich in solar energy resources. When I served on the San Bernardino County Planning Commission, this was in my district in the mid to late 1980s. Still today, this is the largest solar array in the world at 354 megawatts of power. This is a solar thermal energy system, and it runs through these parabolic dishes that run a heat transfer fluid. The sunlight is concentrated on these heat transferred fluid lines, goes through a generator that produces steam to turn a turbine to create electricity. Just looking at the most recent 2 of the 9 SEGS components, though they generate 160 megawatts of power on 0.37 square miles. Mind you, we've got 140 square miles of lake bed to use that are unconstrained of desert tortoise or other types of habitat issues that are a huge constraint for other proposals in the high desert or in pristine desert terrain. So if we took just 10 square miles of the 140 and generated power at the level that we can generate in Kramer Junction, we're generating 4.3 gigawatts of power. This is as much as the entire geothermal energy field. Finally, I think one other idea that has real potential here at the Salton Sea is biodiesel from algae. One of the existing problems in the Salton Sea is that it is too nutrient rich from fertilizer in the agricultural runoff, nitrogen and phosphorus. This causes eutrophication, algae blooms, which have been part of the demise of the fishery in the Salton Sea in years past. In this scenario, we use vertical column algae production arrays like this. One of my companies that I worked with in Austria is one of the pioneers in this particular technology that reduce evaporation to essentially zero. So for every acre foot of water that you're running through this system, nutrient rich already, you don't need to fertilize it, you use every bit of that to generate algae. These are not your casual algae that you find just floating around in the lake. These are highly selected algae strains that are very rich in oil production. And then they have to be pressed and you squeeze the algae out of them. Estimates from this company, Vertigrow, are that we could generate 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel per acre from this type of vertical array. My Austrian colleagues would say, well, we can't generate quite that much, but they were still on the order of 7,000 gallons per acre. This is phenomenally more productive than soybeans or corn or other types of ag diesel fuel crops. If we dedicate just 1,000 acres to biodiesel from algae, we could generate at 10,000 gallons per acre, that's 10 million gallons of diesel fuel a year. All the while we're covering the lake bed and mitigating air quality. So this is my view of the Salton Sea's restoration plan, is that this works either with the Salton Sea Authority type plan with a diked sea or a dam across the middle. Mind you, the authority is trying to be relieved of the geotechnical requirements of a dam because this would have to withstand an 8-point seismic event on the adjacent San Andreas Fault, which drives the cost up into the billions of dollars. If they could be relieved of those requirements, then that brings the cost down to perhaps $1 billion. Still pretty pricey type of infrastructure. Or the same type of renewable energy air quality mitigation could work in a Salton River type of scenario, where we keep the water around the shore where the habitat and the people are, while the reduced inflow is experienced in the middle. Such that my vision is something like a vanishing edge pool. But in this case, we have the Salton River, 2 miles wide or so at its edges around the communities of Salton City and the North Shore and fully around the South Shore as well. And you don't see into the middle of the sea where the renewable energy arrays are producing the energy and the revenues to pay for the infrastructure. So you look right through that and you don't see what's in the middle. So if I may summarize then, and this is where I'll make my pitch to you. I'm trying to raise $50,000 to fully develop this new vision, this conceptual plan that combines renewable energy as an integral part of air quality mitigation for the Salton Sea Restoration Program. This works with the Salton Sea Authority's plan or for a New River type plan. With this, we would take this show on the road and present it to the local constituents and agencies, as well as to the congressionals and decision makers back in DC. I would point out that with the change of the majority in the House of Representatives, my congressman, Jerry Lewis, will ascend to the chair of House Appropriations. And he's been a long-time fan and supporter of our Salton Sea efforts in the past. From them, I would propose that we take one last effort at planning for an integrated water resources and renewable energy program for the Salton Sea, to the tune of $1 to $2 million to do the preliminary design engineering and economic feasibility studies to really look at how this pencils out in terms of energy revenues to pay for infrastructure. With that, I would point out that if we approach this in the right way, with renewable energy as an integral part of air quality mitigation, we accomplish a couple of things. Number one, this streamlines the subsequent applications of each renewable energy application that comes before the local decision makers, such that the new geothermal energy applications that are before you today or solar thermal energy applications could be streamlined under the programmatic EIR, EIS that would be accomplished with this integrated plan. Also, by using renewable energies as a component of air quality mitigation, you automatically invoke overriding considerations for those renewable energy components. And once again, we're talking about covering lake bed that has no other sensitive bugs or bunnies that are going to be potential downsides to the proposed developments in place. So with that, I would seek your support in concept for a proposal such as this integrated renewable energy resources plan.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Krantz?
I've got a question. I appreciate you coming downtown.
Thank you, Director.
Have you looked into any possibilities of using the salt from the sea for energy storage? I understand there's some development that's going on around, it's Gila Bend or Casa Grande, where they're using salt to store energy from some of the solar.
Well, the salinity gradient solar pond is a kind of microcosm of a salt storage type of technology. We've not looked at that on the scale of the sea. I think that's never been done before. Everything that I've talked about here has been demonstrated already at the pilot scale and is doable now with present-day technologies.
So your opinion then that the southern end of the sea has a greater value as an alternative energy cell?
It does. It's got both for geothermal energy as well as for the biodiesel production. It's got the inflows and it's got the agricultural nutrient-rich water to support the biodiesel production as well. So both geothermal and biodiesel. And just basically the bulk of the flows into the sea are coming from the south. So you have the water to play with in terms of what the decision making as to what to do with it and how best to use that.
So in this concept, whatever the flow to the sea is, that's what you're going to work with.
That's right. Whatever the flow is, we all know that it's going to be less than what sustained the sea at minus 227.
Do you see, in terms of litigation in the QSA, part of the concern on the sea, of course, was the air quality issues that you're dealing with there. But there was also the marine effect from the sea on produce crops around the sea.
Yes.
citrus.
It's, when I started this 13 years ago and we began and I formulated and built the database program, most of the concern then was about the fish, wildlife, recreational values, and that has changed completely. We've already lost the fishery, essentially. There are only 2 species left in the sea, pupfish and tilapia. And now the concern, I think rightfully so, it's on human health and air quality, as well as on the potential impacts of the enormity of this for the basin is not just limited to human health. I mean, if we look at Owens Dry Lake, which is another example, it's our best example or worst example of water transfers that dry out a lake. Owens Dry Lake on the east slope of the Sierra Nevada was created when LA Department of Water and Power diverted flows from Mono Lake and the east slope down to LA. And with that, they dried out the lake to where today some 20,000 acres of the lake bed are dust emissive. And that has created the worst air quality particulate pollution in the U.S. And that's where we based these scenarios for air quality and human health impacts on that. These particles from Owens Dry Lake have been measured all the way south to Riverside County, to Phoenix, Arizona. These travel long distances. They've measured episodes of 25,000 parts per million. This is suffocating dust. If you were out in that storm, you would die. You would suffocate, literally. And so we've got Owens times 5 is our potential exposure, and not with a few hundred people living around the shore, but with several hundreds of thousands of people. So this is really has become a very serious issue. Not to mention, Jim, you mentioned the potential of dust deposition on the ag fields themselves and all the salt that would come with that. So there are huge economic impacts all around.
Mr. Krantz, to get the board have any more questions, we need to move on to Vanguard. But I know that
Yes.
the board has discussed something to this effect, to on the south end to start some sort of dust control, whether it be through photovoltaic, geothermal. I think maybe even the algae. We've discussed that, how that would be good. So the board has been discussing that. I think that that's something we can continue to consider. I think especially with the QSA. And how we can incorporate that if we can, or we will wait till after the QSA, and then we would work together, and the state, would pay, et cetera, provide funds.
Right.
We need to work all that out, because I think that the jobs that would bring would be, but I think figuring out the details, that's my position. I know that we've discussed it, and I think but because of the whole QSA thing, it's kind of been a little bit on hold. I can't remember if any of the board directors remember anything different, or if anybody has any more questions.
No, I'd just like to thank you for coming forward. I know that you brought this presentation before the Salton Sea Authority, and I wanted the board to hear the whole presentation themselves, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My last thought is that I know you've been entertaining these different renewable energy alternatives and applications. My thought here is that they should be combined into a programmatic project. And in that, you can streamline each of those different subcomponents or sub-applications to that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz.
Thank you.
Vanguard?
Do we do consent?
Do we do?
I move to approve consent.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please vote.
Good evening. Dan DeVoy, Manager of Human Resources and Loss Control. We have with us tonight Randy Kelso and Joe Verdaro from Vanguard. They're out for their annual visit to go over the fund lineup for our 401A retirement system, our array of funds. And with that, I will turn it over to Randy Kelso for a brief presentation.
Good evening, and thank you very much for taking the time. We understand you have a very full agenda, so we're going to keep this at 15 minutes and as short as we possibly can. My name is Randy Kelso. I'm the relationship manager on the 401k plan, 401a plan. And I've got Joe here. My main goal right now is just talking about one thing, and that's simply what your all-in fee looks like on the plan. The main reason I just want to bring this to your attention is you're seeing more and more legislation from the Department of Labor saying plan sponsors need to realize what they are paying at the end of the day. So by next June, you're going to see a format kind of like this from all providers in the industry. So there's going to be a lot more benchmark industry knowledge out there next year. The main figure, all we're doing is taking the expense ratio, time the assets, plus any hard dollars. At the end of the day, the main figure to focus on is 36 basis points. The most current information I have from a Deloitte study last year was, on average, retirement plans pay about 73 basis points. So this is becoming more and more a fiduciary best practice. You guys need to be aware of it. We can certainly spend a lot more time on it, but I know with your short agenda, I really want to turn it to Joe as we talk about just a couple quick economic updates and some things that are happening within your retirement funds. Any questions on this page? Otherwise, I'll move right along.
Go on.
Okay.
Thank you, Randy. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm a representative of Vanguard's Portfolio Review Department. Portfolio Review is responsible to the Board of Directors of Vanguard for monitoring the activities of the managers of the various funds that are in your plan. And I think if we go, I just usually start with just a quick economic comment before we talk about the funds. And I think that would be on page 49, if we can get there. That's great. Thank you. This page is an executive summary of a market and economic overview. And the reason we talk about the markets and the economy is to help the committee have a context for the performance of the funds. There's too much here to go into at length, but I will point you to the bottom half of this slide, or this page 49 in your books. On the left-hand side, you can see the shape of the U.S. economy, how it really contracted very much during the financial crisis, and how the growth has come back. If you look at the fourth quarter of 2009, you see 5% growth in the GDP during that period, very strong. But now we've slowed down again. So this recovery is a very slow recovery, unusually slow from the kind of recession we had.
Tell me something I don't know.
Okay. If you look to the bottom right in that same conversation, again, the shape of this recovery is we are running at the lower graph there at even less than a V, certainly not a V shape, it's more of a U-shaped recovery. But Vanguard's chief economist, Joe Davis, and his team basically see this recovery as sustainable. So their best case, their most likely case, about an 80% case, that we will stay on a sustainable growth pattern and not fall back into recession. And he's got a very complex model that he uses. It has about a 20% chance that he's wrong and that we could fall backwards. But we think we're in this very shallow recovery that is typical of post-war recoveries from financial crises in a number of countries around the world.
Does the model forecast growth or flat?
It's basically this more of this sort of 2% to 3% growth for the next couple of years.
2 to 3% GDP?
GDP growth in the U.S.
And
yes.
Not like the current 1.6 in the second quarter. third quarter.
Correct. We actually saw the number for the fourth quarter actually came in right around 2%. For the third quarter of 2010, not 2.4, but came in at 2%. So it's the first cut. Each of these comes out and gets revised as we go through. But generally, we see enough. If I had more slides to go through for more time, I would show you different shapes of different parts of the economy, because the manufacturing sector is somewhat V-shaped. Manufacturing having a very strong recovery. The consumer, which is the biggest part of our economy, about 70%, is more of a U-shape. The consumer is taking a long time to come back and spend because the consumer is busy paying down their debts and increasing their savings, trying to get in a better personal shape. So we're seeing that's part of the reason for the slowness of the recovery. Any other questions on the economy before we go on? I mean, it's a broad topic. It's hard to do in a short period of time. But
I understand. Go on.
Yes. Okay. Well, if we go to backwards, let's see if we can, to page 40. What we have in your books under tab 4 is the entire fund lineup that you're offering to the participants in your plan. We'll make the general comment. First of all, this fund lineup is comparing each fund that's in bold, the title of the fund, against its benchmark and against a peer group as measured by Lipper, who measures mutual funds. Your funds are performing as they should. In other words, the index funds are tracking their indices. The actively managed funds, for the most part, are tracking their benchmarks, are doing better than their benchmarks. You have one fund, which is on the next page, page 41 at the bottom, strategic equity, that is trailing its benchmark. That's a quantitatively managed fund that's run by a computer model, and those quantitative managers generally have been struggling over the last couple of years because the computer models are picking out value stocks with some momentum, and those factors haven't been working in the kind of market we've been having over the last 18 months or longer. We think that the model is not broken. We just think that they're going through a temporary out-of-favor phase. So that's the one fund I want to comment on in terms of perhaps trailing. We are not recommending any changes in your lineup at this point. We think you're offering a very thorough lineup to the participants in terms of equity funds, balanced funds, bond funds, stable value funds. Within the equity side, you have domestic and international exposure. You have index funds and actively managed funds. So you really have a nice broad array of choices. The one fund group that I want to talk a little bit more about is the target retirement funds, which you can see there on page 43. And I think you're familiar with how the target retirement funds work, that they have a glide path so that the younger employees, younger participants have more equity exposure, and that equity exposure, the equities being over a long period of time, historically the highest returning category, that exposure drops over time as those participants get closer to retirement. If you go to page 142 in your books, almost there. Yes. You'll see a pictorial representation of that glide path, with the red being domestic stocks, the gold color being international stocks, the blue being bonds. One of the reasons I'm making the comment is that we at Vanguard, our strategic investment strategy group has recommended, and the board has approved, that gold band be widened from 20% of the equity exposure to 30% of the equity exposure, so that international stocks become a bigger part of each of these balanced funds as they go through time. The strategy group feels that a mix somewhere between 20 and 40% of your equity exposure is giving you the exposure to the growth internationally and some diversification without increasing the expense of running the fund unduly. So we've gone from 20 to 30 across the board in that, but without increasing the total equity exposure, just increasing the international exposure. That's the key thing I wanted to get across to the group. Certainly within Vanguard, we have come back strongly from the recession, and our assets have gotten even larger than they were before. We're very happy to be providing these funds and these services to your plan, and at this point, I'll take any questions you have.
So are your fees going to go up for this coming year?
We're trying to keep our fees low or
No,
keep
you
them.
didn't answer
get
my
them-
question. Are your fees going to go up for this coming year?
Randy, I'll let you address
And if they are,
the
for
fees.
how much?
We have not gone through, historically, your set fees, the $10,000 for both plans is not going to change. Now, in terms of the mutual fund expense ratios, historically, those have dropped over time. I don't have that information today. I believe target date funds went from 21 to 19 on average last year or the year before. So as Vanguard continues to well, we continue to push the expense ratios down. I'm not privy to, are those expense ratios going down anytime soon? But in terms of the hard dollars we're charging you, no, those are not going up.
Okay.
Any additional questions, Joe, or I can answer for you?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I hope you catch your plane in time.
Thank you. Thanks for moving us up.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the next item, it's governance, possible revisions to procurement policy.
Yes, President Sanchez, I brought this item forward. I'm requesting that the board give direction to staff to bring back a revised procurement policy, goods and services, and also the MWA, so that they are consistent for consideration and possible adoption. The revised policy should limit the contracting authority of the general manager in the case of multiple contracts with the same party, such that the board authority is required whenever the cumulative amount of any and all contracts for the same party is more than $200,000. And this should be brought back at the next board meeting next week. And that any procurement of goods and services that might be adverse to these provisions be suspended until the board has considered the new revisions for adoption. And if staff could bring an SOP that would memorialize it, be appreciated. That is the direction I'm requesting.
If I might, Mr. President, I just wanted to ask Mike Campbell, because it's your group that would have to revise the policy. Is essentially a week enough time to put all that together? And then we have Donna Gray here perhaps I didn't understand everything Mr. Abadi was proposing, but I believe you were talking about suspending certain contracts, and I don't know about the legal, our legal ability to do certain of those.
You can't suspend a contract that's executed.
Speak into the mic, Mr. Garber.
You can't suspend a contract that's executed. I think you're talking about suspending procurement activity, and I would defer to others about what the impact of that would be.
The next board meeting is next Tuesday in La Quinta. The next meeting after that would be December 7th. Obviously, there would not be enough time to get anything into the board packet by noon tomorrow for the board meeting in La Quinta next week.
How much time do you need, Mr. Campbell?
Well, it depends on what the direction is from the board.
I think we could put a placeholder in the agenda so it could be there, and it could be for discussion and possible adoption at the next meeting. Mr. Kaiser and internals can help out if it's going to take. I think it could be done in a week.
I'd like the board to have discussion
Yeah,
at this
that's
point,
what I was
too.
going to go to, Mr. Campbell. There's two issues on the table. Let's start with the first one. The first one is, I think, which we can bring back next week, is the revision for the multiple contracts. Does the board have any questions or comments to the first item? Nope.
How about the timing of the?
What about concerns from staff?
Well, are you wanting to bring back?
Well, the there was two. One is to suspend, and the other one is just to change in policy, and that's what I'm talking about first. And so the board has no other questions. Staff, do you guys have questions on?
Are you asking? Are you saying we're going to put an action item on the agenda for next Tuesday to change the policy?
Revise.
Revise.
Okay, but do you expect to have a policy in front of you to take action on? Because the agenda memo would be due tomorrow to be submitted. I mean, I'm not sure everybody always appreciates that when we meet on Tuesday, typically this week, Wednesday or Thursday, we have 1 day or 2 days to prepare the materials for the following board meeting. And so I don't know that staff's going to be able to get a new policy together. I think it makes more sense to talk about what you want in that policy.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
I think I've stated on what I want since I brought this forward, and it's not that big of a revision as I worked on a procurement of good insert policy. It's just one little area. I like the placeholder in there, so if you need Thursday, and things have been put on the agenda Thursday too. And some things take times, and sometimes they don't come till Friday. We understand that, but it's as long as it's 72 hours in advance available to the public, it can make the agenda. We've been through this in the past.
For clarification, point of clarification, Director Abadi, you would like to revise the procurement policy with these two bullets that we have here in our agenda packet, in your
Yes.
Contracts for services and supplies in an amount not to exceed 200,000, and number 2, one-time increases to agreements as long as the total agreements amount does not exceed $200,000 in any single contractual year. You want those included in the policy, right?
Whether it doesn't matter the years or scope, it's just cumulative with the same party. If it's over 200,000, it comes to the board.
So if a party has been contracting with IID for the last 10 years, even a $50,000 contract will have to come back to the board. Okay. I mean, I think it might be helpful to spend some time with Donna or Mr. Campbell, just so the board is a little more familiar with what these issues entail. And it's really their expertise that we should be utilizing right now.
You think it would be that difficult, Mrs. Grape?
Actually... Ever come to the mic, please?
I'm not sure if you're looking at a visibility issue or a control issue, but there are many contracts that come before purchasing and the contract administration that are for the same contractor. You may have a contract for a local vendor, let's say Granite, that starts a contract for the water department and next week wins another solicitation for the energy department to do another job. Totally unrelated. You may have the first contract as $100,000 or $200,000, whatever. Every single contract, every single amendment is going to come back to the board. I just think that what you want should be discussed more in some kind of a group setting, because right now I don't think that we have given full consideration of the impact to our process and just exactly what that means in time as far as how many contracts come before you and how it'll slow down the process to be able to get work done. And I can appreciate that you want to put some control measures in, but there is one thing worse than a policy that may have an error is to further complicate it without giving it a full discussion to be able to make sure you hammer out problems.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
For example, Granite, how many of the contract, or I'm not sure they're on the type of contract, how many contracts do we have out there where we have a 3-year contract for $4 million, meaning they can win as many bids, or and does that cut down a lot of the contracts from that would have to return to the board?
You know, there's just so many different types of contracts that I can't really address a question like that just off the cuff. But you realize that the water department went through a solicitation process to be able to get standard rates. And to be able to issue projects to those companies that had awarded, that won the award on that solicitation. And contracts in place such as that are the only thing that saved us during our emergency with the earthquake. So if we had not had these contracts, solicited contracts in place to be able to utilize, then a lot of this money that is considered for federal reimbursement, it would be out the door, because under emergency, you can't solicit. You've got to be able to go forward.
These blanket service agreements are out there, and they do come in front of the board. And this is outside any emergency. This is separate. I'm not looking to touch the emergency, what we do during an
Right, but
emergency.
you have many things that come under the blanket of an MWA. So an MWA may have millions of dollars attached to it. Some things in there, they may define X million for this kind of work with this kind of a contractor. We may go out on a solicitation for it and put it in place. And as long as everything falls under the MWA, everything is covered and doesn't come back to the board because the MWA has been approved. You may also have some professional services under an MWA too. Those are not going to go back to the board because the MWA holds the approval. I think of things like
Doesn't
some
the
of our...
MWA have an amount to it when it is approved?
The MWA has an overall amount. But as long as those contracts fall within that plan of how much they're going to expend under each section of the MWA, those don't come back to the board because you've approved the MWA.
Right.
You think of contractors, well, not a contractor, but professional services with an engineering firm. Again, water department may use them. Energy may use them. General services may use them for totally different projects. And yet, if you had, let's say, one in place with water department for $100,000, energy department puts one in for just under $100,000, then general services needs to have an engineer provide a study for something. All of a sudden now, you're going to have that contract come before you, which the person on general services has no idea what's happening on contracts A and B, which have nothing to do with what they're doing. But now all of a sudden we're at that key amount, and it's going to trigger this cascade. Also, what Jeff was alluding to, it seemed like if you don't have a cutoff point as to when you are considering this $200,000, then virtually, I mean, we live in a pretty closed area. Virtually every single contract will come before you. So I'm just telling you that what you want to achieve is best thought out and worked together with a group to discuss what the impacts are, because little changes in policy mean an awful lot into how we can govern it.
Well, for one example right now, I guess I'm thinking about is, for example, that engineering group that you say is totally different between the energy and water. If we do a blanket MWA, it cuts out competition. If the energy goes out for an energy project, they're going to induce bids, and then the water department's going to induce bids, and everybody's going to bid on different projects. And if we have to do one blanket MWA, that company is going to probably do it all, right? If we go that route.
They don't do anything as far as a blanket MWA. An MWA is
well, I mean, so we
related.
can, because I mean, just so we can know, we can do the vote. In other words, because I mean, it's gonna be kind of difficult if you have to bring a $50,000 vote because the same company is doing work on another for the water department, which is a $200,000 contract, and then he's doing.
It's very difficult because you have projects that all have timetables, and the more projects that you force before the board for situations that I don't think warrant it is going to put us off project lines in a lot of cases. Now, I'm the only one standing up here and addressing some of these things, but I can tell you I've been contacted by a number of people in different areas and departments within the IID, very concerned with just exactly what was going to go forward. Because although I feel I know what you want to control, I have a feeling that if you try to put this kind of language in here, you are asking for a very large snowball coming down which is unusual in the Imperial Valley, but it would happen.
Well, I don't want that to happen, so if you think, why don't we get together tomorrow? And
Well-
we'll hold a placeholder, and we can see
Yeah.
if it's gonna take more time, then we'll schedule it for another meeting. So why
I
don't we
think
get
it would
together
be
tomorrow?
great to get together as a group and discuss what would be logical means to achieve what you want, bring those back, make sure the board is in agreement with that direction, and then move forward with some kind of a recommendation to make some alterations. One thing I can tell you too, there's something in the board policy that talks about one amendment. Well, I can tell you that a contract is a living document, and if it has to change 20 times, you should have 20 amendments to make sure that you capture what is current with what's happening in the contract. So by simply saying you can only go and amend it once, it's too broad of a brush. Maybe you can only amend it once to bring it up to the 200,000, but you may have a timetable change and you have to bump out the time that contract is going to be open. Well, that's another amendment. You may have a whole bunch of things that change with your terms and conditions, or insurance, or the pay schedule. There's all kinds of things that can happen in the life of a contract, and by trying to limit it to one amendment is not a solution. So, again, what you want to achieve versus what the policy says can have drastic results.
Mrs. Gray, I think on the one amendment, that was one amendment without bringing it back to the board. I think that's what that meant.
Well, but you see, Director Hanks, if I have to make a change to terms and conditions.
Let me make another suggestion here. While you're looking at that policy, once you bring us policy and procedure number 3130, and let's get it out here and look at it, because I believe it's still on the books, and I don't think we're following it. And I think it goes hand in hand with this. So while we're looking at these issues, let's...
Well, and you see, and a lot of policies do rely on each other. And if you make a change to one, it needs to be reflected in the other. You've got policies that need to be updated, so... Yeah, well, MWA is not in my arena, but it does get affected by this. I just think I would caution more to going a little bit slower, because the impact is going to be dramatic.
Yeah, I would ask that policy number 3130 be put on the next agenda for discussion.
Mr. Hanks, what is 3130? Just
that's the
for those of us
bidding procedures.
Oh, bidding procedures. Okay.
Director Sanchez, I would like to recommend that Director Abadi and Director Hanks meet with Mrs. Gray and go over the policy changes, the recommended policy changes, and then come back and give a presentation to this board. Hopefully you could do it tomorrow or at your convenience.
All right. Is that fine?
That would be like an ad hoc committee, and then come back and report to the board. Because if we're going to make these changes, we have to make it, and we have to make a smart change where we become more efficient. And what there is, I hate that word transparency, but there is transparency, there is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, there's a lot of things that can happen too in a reporting aspect, so that you have a better comfort level of what's going on. But again, I appreciate that you go through it and make sure that what it says is what we mean.
This word transparency has been used to death. So I just want some accountability, and I think this is what the board is talking about. Mm-hmm. So if Director Hanks and Director Abadi can work with you, and then come back with some proposed changes that the board can understand and we can agree to, I think that would be good.
Yep, I do too.
Donna, when you meet with Director Hanks and Director Abadi, and I know you said some of your other staff is concerned about the controls that are being put on some of the decisions that are being made, and you say it's going to slow the process down and we're going to become less efficient in the way we have to do business because our hands are more tied. So I'd also like you to bring forward some of the situations where it would end up costing us more money, even though we look like we're trying to save money or keep better control of things, like you said, it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Well,
And,
construction contracts, you just don't have the time, the luxury to bring things to the board because you are working on a timetable with a contractor. They have to meet your service dates. Otherwise, they have penalties that come on them. And if we're the ones that slow that decision down, then all holds are off. In fact, they may try and throw other fees back onto us. And I mean, if you stop a contractor long enough, he's going to demob, and that's going to cost another extra fee to you. So, like Jeff says, when a contract is going, the time is.
Well, Mrs. Gray,
also.
are you saying then that spending limits shouldn't matter that the board established?
No, not at all.
Well,
but I'm saying
that's
that there.
That's what we're saying. That's all we're saying. Live within the spending limits and the policy.
Well, I'm going to stop right there.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gray.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Water General Matters.
I have nothing under general matters. I do know we have a presentation on the system conservation plan.
Yeah, number 5.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Oh, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Rossman on other water issues before?
Just on general.
No. Okay. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. All right, we're back on item number 5, update on definite plan system conservation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members. Mike King's going to give an update on that. Just to refresh everybody's memory, back in November of '09, I think was the last more or less complete presentation on that, although in, what was it, Mike, this summer, I think it was.
August 24th.
Yeah, in August, Mr. Broking gave a financial presentation that includes some financials on the definite plan, but Mike's going to go through and bring you up to date, and then, of course, we can answer any questions.
Yeah, and in that process, back on the November 2009, we did talk about the definite plan, the near-term solutions that we had, and then also that we would be bringing back in 2010 an MWA for the total program. So that's what we've been kind of working forward to. The qualification request is what we put out, and it was a request for contractors or consultants to help administer the program from a program management, construction management, design aspect of the program. That qualification request was posted on the IID website through Donna's group on June 30th of 2010. There was a mandatory meeting which for those going that wanted to propose on July 15th of 2010, which was held in the Water Control Center at IID. And also in this, the contract section has been involved through the whole process. Questions related to that particular meeting were due to IID on July 21st of 2010, and answers to the questions were posted on the IID website on July 28th, 2010. And then responses to the QR, the qualification request, were due by close of business on August 5th of 2010. And notification for interviews were sent to the 3 firms that proposed, which was CH2M Hill, a firm called AECom, and Montgomery Watson Harza, and on September 27th of 2010. The interviews were held on October 20th this year, and the selection of the preferred firm was made immediately after the interviews. As soon we had it in this room, as soon as the interviews were over, contracts kept us here. We went through the scoring individually. They added it up, and a firm was picked. And the selection panel was Tina Shields, Ed Hald, Mike Campbell, Jim Ross, and myself. The evaluation letters for the interviews were sent out to the consultants on October 22nd, 2 days after the interviews were done, and the firm selected was a firm called AECom. We met with AECom on November 3rd to start discussions on the development and scope of the work plan, and a second meeting is going to be held on November 17th on the scope and the proposed costs for the work plan. The work plan will be the basis for the development of the MWA for the System Conservation Plan, and that should be Once it's prepared and brought back, it will bring back to the board the total MWA for the total system conservation program for approval in January or February, depending on how soon we can get that done. A little bit of discussion on how we've been planning to move forward on this. We do know that San Diego in October, I believe, gave us $50 million. Now, there's a clawback provision on the $50 million. In that right now we're to the point, I believe, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have $18 million that we do not have to pay back at this time because we're into 2011. And then in 2012, if the QSA is still not settled, but we're still under the stay and so forth, there'll be another $7 million added to that for $25 million that we can spend on capital projects that we're not going to get back to San Diego. But the focus on handling this project is to use that money, not borrow any money, not go past those $18 million and $25 million constraints as we move forward with 4 different programs. And one of those will be the SCADA upgrade, the communications upgrade, delivery measurement, and on that I'm talking, we'll have pilot runs. We'll have one in the north and one in the south. I've talked to both Henry and Mike, and they're giving me different runs that we will try the delivery measurement devices on. And so that'll be a total run with the laptops and the computers and all that stuff as 2 pilot programs, and also the heading and spill automation on those particular pilot runs. And we can do that all within that $18 to $25 million. We will manage that money and not go past that as we move forward on this. And the work plan development we feel will come under the $200,000 limit. We'll get the work plan developed. From the work plan, we develop the MWA, which will be brought back to the board sometime in late January or early February as our plans. So that's kind of been where we've been on the qualification request, and we're not going out to borrow any money. We're just going to use the money, and Dr. Broking, I think, showed in his August 24th presentation.
When did he get his doctorate?
I just elevated.
Well, it seems he has an IID doctorate of some sort. Because
I hear him record Dr. Broking all the time, but I'll excuse me for that. But he gave a presentation on August 24th, and it showed in there that there was funding being budgeted through 2012 to the tune of the $25 million of the money that they couldn't go back and get the clawback. But we know we're only limited at this point to 18. If we get into the QSA's resolved, or if we get into a stay into 2012, there's another $7 million to add to that. So we're going to stay within those constraints, working with our contractor. Now, what we've done is pull that whole schedule of projects back in time. We've pushed them forward in time. We've taken the Mid-Valley Collector. It's pushed all the way to the back end of the program.
If ever.
If it's ever done. And then the inline reservoirs don't start until 2013. So we're only talking about these 4 components that I just mentioned that we need to do anyway. Our communications group suffers much, and Carlos can verify that. On our SCADA and our communications are issues. And we need to address those anyway. We've got the money available at this time to do that, so we felt that this was the proper way to do it. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
And Michael, I think the board remembers that this $50 million can only be used for capital programs on the water system. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
So I'm open for any questions.
Any questions from the board?
No. No, I just said just keep us informed.
Yes, ma'am.
Pilot programs, you're calling them pilot programs, and you have 4?
There's 5. The ones that are the pilot programs, Director Abadi, is the delivery measurement. Okay, what we'll do is we'll take a run and we'll put the measurement devices that we go out to bid for. The contractors will provide the devices, they will install them, and then we'll do a maintenance contract with them where we don't have to add anything to Mr. Ross's staff as we move forward in time. So they'll be all done in that particular way. So the pilot programs are strictly the delivery measurement devices and the headings and the spill gates. And that we'll pilot those, and we'll see maybe the ones that we choose don't work. So we'll go to number 2. But the whole emphasis is not to go district-wide with these measurement devices and find out that they don't work.
Well, how many different pilot programs do you have that are delivery measurements?
None along this. We did what we call automated gates on the orange lateral was the only one that we had that they did automated gates. And they found that the purpose of that program was to find out do the automated gates work. They do, but they don't, in the sense that they don't work unless you automate all the check structures within the lateral itself. In order to do that, it would have been $128 million in addition to the 70 or 80
But we spent
million.
$1.2 million to find that out.
That is correct. And that's the purpose of a pilot program.
How many, are you saying if one doesn't work, you're going to go to another one? How many are there?
We don't know until we get the bids in, Director Body. We know that there's about three. Now, these are not they're not delivery gates like you saw in Orange. They're measurement devices they could be very simplistic. We may have people come in that will give sensor levels upstream and downstream with the recording devices, and then another one may come in and say, well, we can give you a gate that does that. We're going to have to analyze all these things, and that'll be something that'll be left to our consultants as they come in and they go out to bid, prepare the procurement, the bid documents and all this stuff as we go out and try to do this. And we're going to try to keep the cost down as much as we can and try to pick the one, hopefully through all IID staff involved and the consultant staff involved, that we feel has the best assurances of making the project work.
Okay, so the pilot, that delivery measurement is one of the 4 programs you have.
That is correct.
Okay, what are the other 3?
The other 3 is the heading and the spill automation, along with the runs that will have the run. Say it's 4 laterals, will have the delivery measurement devices. Each one of those laterals on that run will also have an automated heading and a spill gate. And along with the laptop that they go through, they can know what their flows are at the heading. They can know the flows at the spills, and they'll be able to monitor the flow at every one of the deliveries that's on their particular run. And then the other one is the communications upgrade, which has to be done because the radio system, 800 megahertz and things like that, are good for radio transmissions things, but they're not the greatest in my understanding as I go through for data transmission. And we're going to have a tremendous amount of data transmission. So there's new technology that we've seen through these consultants that would make it much speedier and better. But that's one of the things, to develop the new communication devices and things that we're going to look at. The SCADA upgrade is software. We need to look at the software that we're using today. Can it take us forward with all this data that we're going to be collecting over the next few years? Is it big enough? Is it robust enough to expand? Do we need to change? Or can we just expand on what we have? And those are the 4 programs that we're going to work on the 2 years.
Deal?
What's that?
Talk about the True
That's
Point?
not True Point, no.
Okay,
no.
what is the other one? That's 2 or 3?
No, that's SCADA upgrade, communications upgrade, delivery measurement, heading and spill automation. That's 4.
Okay, and that will use all the 25 million, up to 25 million?
I don't think it'll use all of it, but we're going to manage it to that point, is what I'm trying to say. We will not go past the 18 to 25 that we were going to be. In other words, if we don't get out of 2011, I've only got 18 million. We're going to manage to that.
Will each one of these have their own MWA, so there'll be 4 MWAs?
No. What we will do from as I talked about before, we're going to develop a work plan. Now, that work plan will go through, and with the indications we have from the contractors, it's under $200,000 to develop a work plan that will show us the contract or the consultants, all of their resources, all of their things that they need to do this job, with using the estimates that we have currently. Okay, the $283 million for all those different programs throughout the whole thing. What effort is it going to take? Resources, people, money. What's it going to take for them to manage a project like that? That's the work plan. Now, from the work plan, we will develop the MWA and have better ways to do the cost breakdowns, the work breakdown structures, and so forth. So this work plan will take about 90 days to complete, and it's going to be they're telling us it's going to be under $200,000. So we'll develop that, and from that work plan, if we agree with that, as we move forward and we think that they're on the right track, we'll know what their costs are going to be, and then we'll put that into the total of the project and bring back an MWA for the $283 million for the whole program back in January or February, and that will be in this. And there will be also, as we develop this contract with the consultants, there will be an off-ramp. If the QSA dies, their contract will go away. So, I mean, we're not just going out there blind.
On all these different ones, looks like you're going to buy a lot of parts. I want to know how much you're committing to training our employees.
That is one of the
All
things
this stuff.
that
I mean, this was happening, a problem we discussed on the Vail Canal. You got to learn to drive before you buy the car. I want to know how much training is going to go in before you start buying all this stuff.
One of the big things we talked about in the consultant interviews that everybody was in there, and every one of them discussed that, we emphasized the fact that the way we make this work is to get the buy-in from the ground up. It's not whether the board buys it, or it's not whether I buy it, or Jim's higher level staff. We got to get the Sandherros to buy in. Also in the process, I'm developing a communications group within the IID that each one of the disciplines, and there's 11 different people that are going to serve on this. Operations, maintenance, construction, IT, finance, I mean, you name it. There's 11 different point people that will be that, and we will involve those groups as we move through that process to help in that. So our whole goal is to tell the consultants too, part of this is to train these people where they know how to use the stuff and they're not going out there and seeing it the first time. We give them a pickup with a laptop in it and say, go to work. And that is part of this process, is the training of the people that are in the field. Fortunately, with the 2 pilot programs, we only have, about 6 or 7 people to train because you have your regular day Sandherro and you got some relief Sandherros and things like that. So you don't have as many to train initially. But the whole concept is they have to understand in order to know how to use it. You're right. They're not just giving the key to the car like when I bought my last car and then try to figure out how to use sync.
So they're going to, and the construction crews will be trained, since they got to put them in, they're going to have to work on them and stuff. So there's training there too.
The construction crews on the delivery measurement devices, the contract will be put such that whoever this is will provide the devices, they will install them, and there will be a maintenance contract put together where we're not having to maintain them at all. They will have a presence here to install, to deliver, install, and maintain, where we don't have to add forces, because you're looking at 5,600 deliveries, 350 more automated gates, and that would take a tremendous scale of staff. And
I don't see any training going to our construction workers like they can ride along, or somebody be hanging with them in case they go that way. Otherwise, if you decide to choose one of these pilot programs, next thing you know, then you're going to start your training.
Well, we hadn't planned to do the construction with our forces, though.
I mean, what else? That's why a pilot's a pilot.
Yeah. We can definitely have our construction crews go along, but we weren't planning on using our construction forces because they've been cut down. We don't have as many, so we wouldn't, and we don't have enough construction forces to put in 5,600 gates in 5 years if we take off and go.
Well, I hope a lot of those people would be put to work would be local people, local construction people.
Oh, I'm sure they would be.
A lot of people out there who used to build homes aren't doing anything right now.
Yeah.
Mr. Hanks, did you have a question?
Yeah. I want to go back to the request for qualifications. I think it was last meeting you mentioned palm or something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing up there, so that's
my voice doesn't travel very well. You mentioned that AECOM is that how you say it was selected?
Yes, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's capital capital AECOM, AECOM, and that's the way they pronounce it. They bought up a lot of different firms. They're very large worldwide. They showed us the breadth and depth of their organization, and they have a lot of things to offer, and that's one of the reasons they were chosen. They bought up Boyle Engineering, different UMA, SCADA people. I mean, there's lots of firms that they've bought up over time, and they're a very big organization.
Are we going to be opening ourselves up to any current past consultants or employees or subsidiaries or suppliers tied to this company?
No.
Okay.
In the case, what they've done is, in the process, one of the things we emphasized in the QR was the use of local contractors and vendors. They have a lot of surveying people. Most, like AECOM, I believe, have 2 or 3 engineering firms on deals, a number of geotechs. I mean, they've loaded themselves up with local people to do a lot of the local work. And none of the parts of their organization have anything to do with gates, measurement devices, or anything to that process.
Okay. And what about the WCAB? Are they going to get information on this? I had several call me, and they had questions, and I couldn't answer them.
Yeah. So. I'm not here tomorrow. I'm in CRB, so I won't be able to give a report there. I'd be glad to go to them and give a report. I did give a report at the last CAB WCAB meeting. They were just wanting some information on the inline reservoirs. The inline reservoirs are not in this program at this point, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time in going into the analysis of why they're the sizes they are. The cost estimates are very, very high level. I don't believe they're going to cost what's in there, and I think this program would come in under that. But as we get into develop the design of the inline reservoirs, we will definitely be talking, I guess, basically through the WCAB and bringing them into the picture for concepts, ideas as we move through this. And we did tell our consultants that that is part of the process also.
Yeah.
So you will, at some point in time, then bring a contract to the board?
Yes.
For this AECOM plus then these 4 projects that you have going?
Will be in the total MWA, but it'll have a schedule that shows that limitation. And if we get to a point where we're haven't come to resolution, we'll have to stop at the 18 or 25 million and not move forward.
Okay, but are they separate?
No, I was bringing them together as one MWA. But it'll have the verbiage in it that this is as far as it can go with the money we have.
Yeah, and as well, this is in similar scope, at least financially, as El Centro 3 repowering. So it's going to be very comprehensive. If we anticipate bringing back quarterly updates, I mean, assuming you approve the project, and we can discuss so that you're comfortable what the off ramps are, because as Mike said, this is a completely pay-as-you-go, at least for the next 2 years, and there are a lot of external forces that can stop the project, and we want to give the board, full disclosure on that.
We'll be working very close with Jeff on this because it'll be a complex contract with these guys as we move forward to make sure we get all the bases covered.
At the same time, these are the things that are needed to move forward with the QSA if it doesn't die, right?
Yes, but even if the QSA dies, we need new SCADA. We need new communications. And we're spending the money on the stuff we need today that don't have the money for. So we're not going to, if the QSA just died and went away, we're not going to lose anything. We got a new communication system.
It becomes even more important if the QSA doesn't die.
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens if you're not satisfied with, if you tie it all together and you start moving, okay, and you're not satisfied, how do you separate that, the MWA then? Do you just?
Well, the MWA only gives you authorization to spend, and you're saying not satisfied. You're talking about not being satisfied with the delivery measurement device. That's just a contract that we're going to have with someone. And in that contract, it'll be such in the pilot program, if your equipment doesn't perform, you're out. And we'll move on. But, I mean, we're going to be presented with different ideas and different ways to do it. We're going to pick what we think is best. I doubt seriously that the one we pick is not going to work, but you never know. And so we're just trying to make allowances that we leave ourselves the option if what we choose doesn't work, then we can move on to another vendor.
Okay.
And that's why we don't want to go too big.
And what about project management on this?
The project management will be the outside firm. They're going to be doing the project management, working in conjunction with our own inside project management group, as oversight is like reporting and everything. I've already talking to Mike, all the reports and stuff. We'll be able to view that. They use SharePoint, which we have SharePoint. They're using common things that we can look at to from our perspective to see control. But as one of the Dr. Brady's already made alluded to that, these consultants are very aware that every quarter they will be in front of this board, not me, but they will be in front of the board giving you an update of where we are.
Dr. Brady alluded to this sort of like Unit 3. Are we doing the same thing with Unit 3? Is it tied in with our PMO?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they have the plan and timelines,
but they're working. We have an external project manager, as you met, Joe Gatlin, which he's been before the board. But I see these projects as very similar. We want to stay on top of them. We want to do quarterly updates. We want to give you early warning on any shifts or problems, or that we want to shut down part of it. To Mr. Abadi's comments about are these separate, we will be tracking all of the elements within the overall MWA. We will be tracking those. So we're not going to, it's not going to be, the detail's not going to be lost.
So the funding for this project is coming from the Fifth Amendment, is that correct?
The $50 million, correct.
Right. And there's, on that clawback, there's 18 million available up front.
I believe there's 18 million set up right now that we can get that doesn't get clawed back on.
I'm sorry I didn't bring the chart with me, and I might have it wrong, but I think in 2011, I think only 32 million is subject to clawback, and that's where Mike's getting the 18 from.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, because if I had the chart in front of me, I'd tell you the
And I've worked very closely with Mr. Broking on this. I want to call him Doc. You know, so you call him Doctor. You got me all messed up.
Is this going to be in the 2011 budget?
Yes, it is in the 2011 budget right now, as he showed you in the August 2011. I can't want to get Doctor off my mind. I'm sorry.
Dr. Broking is willing to answer your question, I think, if you let him come on up.
You want to answer that?
Now, does San Diego have any ties to this, sort of like a Met 1, Met 2, or is this?
Well,
I know there was some requirements that it had to be.
It has to be used for capital projects, and it is a payment for future provision of water. However, the way it's set up, it's not subject to repayment if something happens with the QSA.
Okay, but they have no say in the project, or?
Oh, yes, their say is it has to be used for capital projects, and it has to be accounted for in a certain way that satisfies, because they borrowed money by selling bonds to provide this money. So we have to account for it in a fairly particular way. There are accounting requirements and the requirements on how we use it.
But do we have to get their approval then up front on this?
No.
On design?
But if we move ahead and we don't get their approval, then we're...
No, it's not, but we have to account for it in the way which we've already agreed to do.
Right.
Okay.
Director Mendoza?
Yeah, Mr. King, heading and spill automation, I'm a little concerned because some of the automation we have going on with the gates, for some reason, they don't work all the time. Maybe critters from outer space, whatever, they have signals from their spaceships because they open and close. And how are you going to address that in this particular project?
One of the things we've talked about as we did the consultant interviews and we had our one meeting with the consultants, we've let them know the part of our problem. Part of it can be communications. Part of it can be just the grounding that we have. We've been told that possibly we're not grounded effectively, can have a big aspect to this.
How are we not grounded effectively?
Our soils are not real conducive to grounding. And so one of the things that's been talked about is to drill the hole, drop the rod in, and also put chemicals. There's chemicals that you put around it that make the grounding more effective. It's like on a car. If you don't have your car grounded, it doesn't start, or your points will wear out, your starter things will wear out, things like that. I'm going to mechanical things I know about grounding. But when you get into that, it's kind of the same thing, and you can have interference because you're not grounded properly. We don't know that that's the problem. That's just one of the things we've asked the consultant's going to have to look at as we go through all that stuff. Now, the other thing to realize, too, is that we have a lot of gates in this system that are automated. And we're not looking at 50% of our gates that are malfunctioning. It's a very, very small percentage when you look at what we have going along. Unfortunately, we have one or two gates that continue to have problems. Now, that's not necessary, but we have the same gates with the same technology someplace else that are working fine. There's something wrong out there, which we just haven't been able to apparently come on to what's going on. And those are the types of things that I'm emphasizing to them as we talk to them, is that I can't have that. We got to be able to rely on those gates. And so we're holding we want a good communications expert, a good integrator, a good SCADA person that works on this, top-notch people. And we're not going to move forward with anything that's going to get it where we got 25% of our gates malfunctioning every day.
Mr. King, even if 1, 2, or 3 gates malfunction, those gates can malfunction and spill water where they could damage property, and it would cost hundreds
can
of
tell you,
thousands of
Direct-
dollars. So just because one or two malfunction, it doesn't make it acceptable.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But also, you don't hear as much about them, but we have canals that top over with wooden gates in them too. So it's not just those gates. We're starting to get
How
in.
often do those wooden gates
Oh,
spill?
I don't go back on them because it's not that big of an issue.
When was the
because
last
it
time
happens.
when was the last?
I've been out of that realm and I don't know, but I do know they're very. It's happened before because I've had when I
Back
was in
in
construction.
1930 or when?
Yeah, I've got a memory. It happened once. It happens every day. No, but it does.
1905.
1905. The headings get plus wrong. Not plus wrong, but things get changed. It doesn't get cut out in time. Different things. It has happened, and we've
I
washed out a lot
understand.
of concrete.
I just want to make
so.
sure that when you talk about automation,
Yeah.
my concern, and that's
I
being
know, but
addressed.
The understanding is this whole program is giving our people new tools, and we're moving along in time. So
Okay,
that's all I'm saying.
Thank you. That's
Go ahead, Director Miller.
You've got this MWA that's going to be under 200 grand.
It's not an MWA. It'd be just a service
but
agreement
it's a
that we
service
get
agreement.
prepared.
And then you're going to come back to the board, and we're going to take a vote on the big picture, which
That's
you
correct.
said was a $283 million, like we did on Unit 3 on
Right.
the energy side.
That is correct.
And then when you bring the 4 projects forward for the $18 million, there's not going to be any more votes on those things. It's just going to be quarterly
It will
reports,
be. It will
progress.
be. The 4 projects will be in the MWA that I bring you.
Right.
And it will be talking about what we plan to do in that 2-year period along the timelines that we have, the money we're going to spend there and move forward on that. So it's not we're going to get this thing and just go busting out there. We have our limits. We know that through 2012 or 11, we got 18. We get into 12, we got 25. We ran out of money at that point. We haven't resolved the QSA or moving any farther forward. As long as we have a stay, there's a little bit more money to spend each year, but $50 million doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
So
But
we would get stopped eventually if it keeps going for the next 5 years.
The point I'm saying is the board's going to vote on the big picture.
Right.
And then you have the right to spend the $18 million as long as everything's working. on
That's-
the 4
that's
projects
the-
you're talking
that's the
about,
approach that we're
without
going to
having
be
to come
putting.
back to the board for permission every time you're going to do something on the $18 million, correct?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
I just have a couple comments. One is I thought we already voted on the definite plan that this board voted 3-2 to move with the $283 million plan. Meaning, therefore, now you just have to bring back to the board the little, I guess, little monies that your time schedule. But as far as the 283, you're saying you're going to bring that back when
Well,
we've
we're bringing
already-
back because when the process that we talked about it, that you gave us the approval to move forward with the definite plan, which is the 283.
Which is about 2-3 years ago, right?
Minus some of the other pieces we've already done. But we still have to bring back an MWA.
Yeah.
Okay, and I would gladly take your blanket approval that I can move forward where I don't have to do that.
Okay.
But I feel like we got to bring back the 283.
Okay, and so that after when we bring back the 283, then you're going to bring back again the 18 million.
No, it's all inclusive.
It's all okay.
It's
All
inclusive.
right.
And where's the funding for that $283 million coming from?
It's going to have to be.
Well,
If the QSA stays intact, it's there.
yeah. And also, I think.
Wait.
Well, I wasn't finished with my comments.
Now that
Dr. Hanks.
I'll go ahead. Board President, you're supposed to go last.
I think the biggest thing, I think, just the last comment, is that $50 million we got up front saves us $100 million, in which we can probably use on farm, because instead of borrowing 283, we may only borrow 220, which that 50 million on interest over 30 years, which is a lot of money.
It's a big benefit.
So I think the more down payment, so to speak, we can put up front, the better off would be. Director Hanks, I think Director Abadi was next, but if Director Abadi wants to give the floor to Director Hanks.
I will give it to Mr. Director Hanks.
Director Hanks.
I need some water.
This 283. This was the bond that we were talking about moving forward. That had an iBank bond, and that still hasn't been resolved.
I'll let Greg talk to that because he's the finance guy.
Yes, right now there are no plans to borrow any money because the guarantee that we think resolved with the iBank through the legislation because of the state's credit rating. We believe the interest rate that we would have to pay would be considerably above what we would have to pay or considerably above market. And we think that's one reason, because of the state's credit rating, and also because of the status of the QSA. There's also, I believe, more investors would think there would be more risk because the initial ruling by the trial court judge was that the contracts were invalid. So for the near term, until there's gets to be some resolution on the litigation of the QSA, the only money that I would recommend that the district spend would be what the Water Authority is providing us, subject to the clawback provisions, which is what Mike is suggesting we do also.
Yeah, I would just suggest that as talks continue on the QSA, that issue be addressed. That IBank. That's because there are certain aspects in the QSA that use that IBank to trigger different projects. And without that, you've got a. You probably have to take time to read that like I have, so I'll just leave it there.
Director Body?
Mr. King, you said that these contractors, or who all these people are made up, are coming in, they're going to be in charge of operating it, maintaining it, and running it. So basically, we're not going to have any control over these pilots, basically. And no one in San Diego would want some kind of return on investment.
I didn't say they're going to operate them. We're going to do the O&M. In other words, they're going to do the maintenance on them. The operations will be done by our folks. Then as we'll operate the system. Our Sanjeros will operate the system just like we always have operated it. They'll just furnish, and I may have said the O&M, but they're going to furnish them with devices, install the devices, and maintain the devices.
That lateral, the whole thing.
No. Just the devices, not the cleaning, all that stuff.
Okay, what risk do they assume going in this, knowing San Diego is going to want some return if it doesn't work? I mean, are they going to pick up their stuff and head back to where they came from, and
we'll
put
have
our
a
stuff back
contract
in
with them,
original,
so
original
they're going to
shape that we
maintain
got
it
before they tore it apart?
They're going to maintain the devices according to the contract that's put out. There'll be a contract that'll be let to them, and it'll have specifications, design standards that they have to maintain it to, just like you would with any contractor that was on a job site.
If their device opens up too much or doesn't open all and floods somebody out, do they have the liability of that?
We haven't got into those types of negotiations and talk yet, Director Body, because that's just way down the road as we develop these contracts.
The board will look for when those agreements come forward.
I think, are we all done with comments? I guess my end of the comments are always on this issue is we can buy this system on San Diego's dollar and not our future generations. I think as California continues to move forward, they're going to be more tighter, more regulation. This will be, I think, a mandatory later in about 15 years. And just because your computer freezes doesn't mean you pick it up and throw it away, throw it against the wall. You call a service tech and they come out and so, I mean, technology is going to have their issues, and hopefully we can just manage around them. So
Dr. Cloak, what do you know about this bad grounding? I mean, we ground a lot of stuff in the energy side. I mean, what do you know about bad grounding? And houses are ground all over the valley. I mean,
jump right into that water side.
PhD in economics, and I'm sure he knows about it.
Ask Dr. Cloak.
I know that if I don't ground my car correctly, it doesn't start. Grounding is a problem. We actually, because of bad grounding, was one of the reasons that some of the KNKS cathodic protection started to fail, and we started seeing rusting of our steel frames.
That's a different level of
I don't know in this case what grounding requirements there are. So I can't answer that.
If I could mention, when we were doing our interviews with all the consultant teams, we were asking them the question about what happened when we had the lightning strikes and it interfered with the power to our units and disrupted some of our gates. And we asked each firm what they thought the cause of that might be, and every single one of their experts said it's more than likely, from what they've seen elsewhere, a grounding issue. And some of them are familiar with the valley and indicated that, yes, in fact, it's the type of soil that you have in this area that you probably have to do a little more serious grounding than what would be, typical in other areas. So that's kind of where we picked up the grounding piece as it relates to the electrical interference that we might get from the amount of lightning that we get in the area.
Are we going to purchase lightning rods now for all this stuff?
Well, we will have to make sure that with the new technology that we take that into account.
All right, thank you.
So I will bring back the work plan and stuff in the future.
I think that'll be about 90 days.
Energy General Matters.
Dr. Coate.
Good evening, Mr. President, Board. Dave Koch, Energy Manager. There's two things. First, I'm pleased to announce that the construction of the Midway Bannister line has begun. We were going to have a groundbreaking ceremony, but because of schedules, holidays, and the upcoming NERC audit, we decided to make it into a dedication ceremony about 90 days later. The construction has begun just south of Midway Bannister, moving west from that point, and the first couple of concrete structures have been drilled and poured. Secondly, some of you may may have seen we're doing on the demand side management program a double rebate program between now and the end of the year to make sure that to make sure that there's more money available to people who decide to institute or purchase demand-side management and conservation devices. And this will go through the holidays, and hopefully people will take advantage of this.
Dr. Koch, how did that information get out to the public?
We're doing radio spots, and it's in the IV Press and the Desert Sun.
I got a call from a member of the Energy Advisory, Energy Conservation Advisory Committee, and he learned about that through the Daily Digest from Marion, and he was not aware of that, and so he said, you know, we as we serve on this committee and we give of our time, as a courtesy, we should have been informed so that we could tell the public of these rebates, because even he did not know about that. And so that was his comment.
We informed them last night. It was the first
after the fact.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Point taken.
You probably heard from him as well, or from some members of the committee that felt that their concern is that we give our time and our effort to sit on this committee, and yet they don't really take us seriously, because in issues like this rebates that really affect the ratepayers, they don't give us that information in a timely fashion. Also, as far as how you spend the money for the ECA, not that any cost adjustment, not the other one, the
energy cost adjustment.
Energy. No. What do you call it? Benefits? Yeah, the public benefit charge.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Like we have one of the ideas that he brought forward. He said, why not have the ECAC form a committee, or have that committee look at ways of advising you how to, on the projects that you're going to select to utilize the money that you have to spend.
That's fine with me, madam. This year we presented the different programs to the ECAC in either August or September, showing the programs that we had planned going forward in 2011, the new programs that were included in the budget, and received, I believe, very favorable reviews from the ECAC.
Yeah.
We presented the anticipated funding, how much was going to the residential programs, how much was left over, and then showed how much money was available for conservation demand-side programs, then presented a synopsis of each of the programs and the anticipated funding.
Well, I guess, at least from one committee member, if he felt that perhaps we're not utilizing their expertise and their willingness to help, to serve, especially when it comes to advising us on how to spend the public benefit charge money and how to use them more effectively, because some of the members of the committee have business experience, they're business owners, and they like to be more effective. And they just feel that they're not really taken seriously. And unless that changes, like this particular person said, why do I come to these meetings once a month, make the effort to go to La Quinta and come to El Centro, and I hear about these rebates secondhand. It should have come before the committee. And so, just anyway, food for thought. And I understand where he was coming from, so.
Point taken.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Koch? Did you say energy manager or assistant energy manager?
I am energy manager.
As opposed to the assistant general manager.
As opposed to the assistant general manager, which is Etta Jan.
Oh.
What you switched?
Huh?
No.
General question.
Yeah, Director Body.
Did that complete your general matters? Because you have a video, don't
Someone
you?
said there was a question.
Yeah, no, Director Body has.
Oh, I'm
Still under
sorry.
general, or are you still talking general, or are you getting ready to move on to the La Paz Solar?
I'm ready to move on to La Paz.
Okay, when I heard from some CD residents, they're trying to get Drew Road redone, and they're saying that they're waiting, the county is telling them that they're waiting on the IID to move some wire. And I told them I was not aware of that, because they'd like to be able to get to I-8 someday. And now the county's telling them that they're waiting on the IID to move some wire. What do we know about that?
What was the specific area?
In Sealy, Director? In Sealy area?
Well, I guess it must cross the Sunbeam, Drew Road somewhere around Sunbeam, because they're just trying to get to I-8, and that's the only place that I know that's broken between Sealy and Interstate 8.
That the line is broken? The line is
No,
down?
they said they're waiting for the IID to move some line or something so they can finish repairing that road. That's what the county's telling them.
Line?
Huh?
Or a power
Oh,
line?
road.
There is a line that the county needs to have us move so they can fix the road.
Oh.
What road is this?
Drew.
Drew Road up at by Sealy to relocate a line?
No, they said they're all they told me, the residents told me, is the county told them they're waiting for the IID to move a line.
Okay.
I just want to know, do you know anything about it? Can you find out so I can tell them, or is it just the county trying to blame something on the IID?
Let me find out for you, Director Body, and I will forward it over to
Well,
the
what do you
county.
think it is, Director Abadi?
Well, for all the work, I'm sure everybody else gets it, but I just, I told them I wasn't aware of it.
I am not aware of any project that the county has requested that we relocate a line at Drew Road at this point. But I'll find out the details of it.
All right. Item number 7, La Paz Solar Tower Project.
Dr. Koch has a video.
Is it as cool as the one that from the Salton Sea?
Well, you be the judge. You be the judge on this thing.
What does the X stand for, Dr. Cole?
Xavier.
Oh, Xavier. My son's name is Javier, but with a J.
Mine is Saint Xavier.
Yeah, yeah.
Though they were misnamed.
Patron
Misnomer, huh?
patron saint of economists or something.
Yes. I'm pleased to present for information only tonight the La Paz Solar Tower. This is a SCAPA project. In the board package, there is an ordinance. This is going to be done by ordinance in accordance with SCAPA policies. If there's any questions about the ordinance itself, this would be best answered. Why we have to do it by ordinance is a oddity to me. I've never done a project by ordinance before, but Mr. Taylor can talk about that.
It's a grounding problem.
And all the SCAPA members have to approve the project by ordinance as well, correct?
That's correct. Most of the other, in fact, I think all of the other participants are cities, and that's the way that they
Yeah,
would normally.
I served in the Brawley City Council, so you do it by ordinance.
Yes, but there's, in this case, Government Code Section 54241, it's a section that applies to what's called public leasebacks, and because of the issuance of bonds or the potential issuance of bonds in connection with the option to purchase, SCAPA believes that the project could conceivably qualify as a public leaseback. And when you do public leasebacks under Government Code Section 54242, you have to do it by ordinance. So that's the reason that we're doing this by ordinance as opposed to a resolution.
Whatever it takes.
The project is a 200 megawatt resource with an approximately a 60% capacity factor. It has zero emissions, there's no fossil fuel backup, zero water use, and a useful asset life of around 75 years. And let me show you the animation. Now, this animation was put together, obviously, by EnviroMission, which is the company that is going to be building the tower. The tower itself is going to be just slightly east of Lake Havasu in La Paz, Arizona. This is the tower itself. The section outside the greenhouse area is approximately 1 mile in radius from the tower itself. Please take a look at the top of the tower.
We can. You're going down.
You'll have a chance for it.
I think this might be cooler than Krantz's presentation.
This is just the monorail going from the entrance to the tower base. You see the windmill turbines here. These
Why can't people walk?
Too far. Well, it's 1 mile. Oh. Unfortunately, now remember, this is over 3,000 feet tall, so whoever wants to go up on the observation deck is welcome to. I never will.
Scare the shit out of you. You're going to have to pay.
I can feel it, my legs are.
That the ninth one
Well,
in the
you can
world?
fall right through those bars.
This is how it works. Essentially, the tower itself is nothing more than a chimney that gathers the air from the greenhouse and then brings it in at about 45 feet per second. Each of these towers are 6 megawatts, and the roughly 32 turbines combine to the 200 megawatts. This gives you an idea of the scale.
It's going to be like off the page. It's way up there.
Is that the first of its type to be built?
This is the largest of its type to be built.
First and the last.
Is that going to be the ninth
actually
one in the
not.
world?
Here, again, you see the effects of the chimney on temperature as you start moving up. As you've gone through the entire 3,000 feet of the tower itself. And no, because of the very favorable economics and low emissions, zero water use, they're looking at building 5 in that particular area.
All the same size, the same height?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it be like Stonehenge?
I hope not.
Is it going to be taller than the Kuwait?
It is
taller than that new building they built out there.
Dubai.
Dubai.
Actually, this company is the company that built Dubai, the Dubai towers, and the reason is that they have a particular technology, and I had never thought about it, not being a high-rise construction person, the difficulty of moving that much concrete that far up into the air. They've developed a way to do it. And that's why they've been able to build some of these larger buildings across the world.
David, you might mention that this 1 mile diameter area that actually you grow crops.
You could. They're going to put plants in that showed orange trees in there. I don't know what they're going to actually do underneath it once they get started, but at least for an artistic rendition, they put the orange trees underneath.
So this is for 5 towers or for 1 tower?
We are in for 15 megawatts.
Which is how much? What percent, Dave? It's
Well,
300
we're
megawatts, right?
We're 15% of the SCAPA participants, and I'll show that.
Is it 300 megawatts per tower or 300 megawatts for the 5 towers?
Each of the 5 towers is 200. This is phase 1 of 200 megawatts, of which we are in for 15 megawatts for 7.5% of capacity.
What's the cost per kilowatt hour? What's the cost per kilowatt hour? What's the cost per kilowatt?
This is a 30-year power sales agreement at $95.50, escalating after $1 per megawatt hour after year 15. Must take pay for performance means that if they generate, we have to take it. If they don't generate, we have no risk whatsoever. There's no capacity charge, and they're responsible for delivery through Western at Blythe Knob in our case. For the other participants, they deliver at different delivery points. But I would like to emphasize this is pay for performance. If the project doesn't work, if it falls apart,
If it falls down?
if it were to fall down, there would be no obligation on the part of the district to have any payment whatsoever going forward with it.
When do we have to pay?
Only when after they deliver energy. Okay, so because of the makeup, this is very much of a different type of a solar. Generally, solar operates for about 6 or 7 hours per day. This operates about 16 hours per day because of the latent heat buildup underneath the greenhouse. So the capacity factor of this is estimated at 60%. If it goes above 63%, we save $1 per megawatt hour for any of the energy above that. We also have on this the right SCAPA. And remember, the contract is between Enviromission and SCAPA. And then we are a SCAPA participant. So there is a power purchase agreement between SCAPA and Environmental Mission, and then a power sales agreement between ourselves and SCAPA. Only to the extent that SCAPA has charges due to Enviromission are there charges to them, and those charges then only get passed on to us in the event that the project actually generates. Also, there is a prepay and buyout option should the SCAPA participants decide to do so. The project cost is somewhere between $670 million and $1 billion.
Per tower or the whole 5 towers?
Per tower. I do not believe that we will ever purchase this, but the contract gives us the opportunity to do so should we desire.
We can purchase the entire thing or 15%?
SCAPA would have to purchase 100% of the tower, and then the SCAPA participants would then be responsible for the debt on that, and O&M and all things. At this point, there is no intent to do that, but SCAPA prefers to always have the opportunity to do that should it want. But I'm very comfortable with the 9450. If in comparison, remember that we're looking now at our purchase from Sun Peak Solar is about $104. Our purchase from Green Hunter Mesquite is $105. Our purchase from the geothermal company is $102. We have several bids out on some small hydro, including the All-American Canal, that are again in the 100. This would be the least expensive of all the renewable generation resources that we're looking at.
What does the energy pay for the falling water charge for the hydros? What does it come out to, more or less? I know it's $7.3 million a year. What is it per? Is it what?
Isn't it about $49, $50? I don't know. I would have to calculate that. I believe it's around a little bit less than $50 a megawatt hour,
I think it's more than that.
I could find out very easily.
I know it's more than that, Dr. Cole.
Okay.
All right, does the board have any other questions for this project?
Yeah, I got a question. If you'll indulge me, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Today's not April Fool, right?
No, it's not.
Not April 1st. And you understand, I'm still a guy that takes a buggy whip out to my automobile, okay? So that's just a little much for me.
Essentially, this is nothing more than a chimney with a turbine in front of it.
But it's 3,000 feet high.
It's a big chimney with a turbine in front of it.
I mean, if you have an earthquake and the ground moves a half an inch at the base, what is it going to move at the top?
It is actually designed for an 8.7 earthquake. It is well designed.
It'll sway with the...
It will sway quite a bit. If I had to make a guess, just thinking of how much some of the buildings in Phoenix sway, if it's proportional, and I have no idea that it is, because again, I've never built one of these, but if it's proportional, about 200 feet on top, so it'll be swaying. You do not want to be there during an earthquake.
I don't want to climb to the top. I just want to stay back from a long distance away and watch that thing go up.
At least 3,100 feet from...
I truly, I believe, and as you know, I've been a proponent of this project for a long time. Building something that you'll be able to stand on top of above Lake Havasu and almost see El Centro. Not quite, but almost. I think would be a shame not to be a participant in.
The key is it's power purchase agreement. We don't have anything into it. If we get power out of it, we pay for the power.
I just want to make sure he wasn't pulling my leg. Yeah.
But no,
No,
it's not
sir.
April 1st.
This is a very serious project that a lot of technology has been.
I know you're serious about it.
I know. Sir. You're making fun of my leg.
No, it's just I keep looking at you and I see Back to the Future all over again. Here, you know.
Well, Director, we heard the thing in the Salton Sea, and I talked to you, just briefly. Look at where we're going. We have geothermal, solar.
I understand, but this one you're going to have to let me off the train, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
And I think what doesn't get talked about enough, and which I think the public should know, is that, for example, this is $9,500 megawatt. Everything that the district is moving forward is green energy, and green energy does come at a cost, which means higher rates.
Yep.
So I think that's important to continue to let the public know that that the green energy does come at a price.
And we will be having a workshop on that shortly, either in December or January, on the way in which we're integrating renewable resources into our mix and actually doing a fairly decent job of minimizing the rate impact on our customer.
So you'll bring this back for the 16th for approval?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. We move on to number 8,
Thank you.
extension of alliance contracts for stock materials.
And Mario, are you going to?
Yes.
Okay.
3,000 feet, man, that's...
Thank you, Dr. Brady and President Sanchez. My presentation is a
What
little bit
about
more...
the rest of the board? What are we, chopped liver? What?
The game starts in about 5 minutes.
I know, it already started.
We're trying to hurry
I
up.
passed a note to the president. He just threw it away.
He's hinting that he's going to be about half an hour.
And the rest of the esteemed board, mine's a little more down to earth, the presentation. If you recall, about in 2007, we brought forth to the board the concept of entering into alliances with many of our material suppliers, what we would refer to as critical suppliers, at a very tough time in the economy when not so much of the fact that it was downturn, but there was such a demand for material that we were being left behind by a lot of the other utilities. We then, of course, with the approval of the board, we went ahead and entered into 5 such alliances. At that time, then not president of the board, but Director Sanchez had requested that we come back and kind of report the progress of the alliances, and we would like to take that opportunity to do that now, and also to mention to the board that we are recommending that we actually extend these alliances for another period of 3 years.
And you'll bring that back for action at another meeting?
Actually, this is just information to the board, because really, since we don't enter into any real purchase agreements to them, everything is really bought under them through some already approved MWA or service agreement. But it's just, we wanted to take the opportunity to do 2 things, again, which was to kind of give the progress of how well the alliances have worked, and then just to inform the board that we've done some, the committee has done some extensive research and price validation, and at this time they're just not recommended it'd be worthwhile to go out and go through the whole process of rebidding the alliances. I think.
You didn't answer my question, Mr. Escalera.
Sorry, ma'am, I thought I did, but yes.
So are you going to come back and ask for approval to extend
No.
this alliance?
The intent is to inform the board that we, due to the recommendation of both the purchasing agent and all of the committee, that they felt that we would be able to just go ahead and extend it. We just wanted to make the board aware, again, that we were going to do so.
And why is the purchasing agent, Ms. Gray, why is she not part of your presentation?
Because she is part of our committee.
So
A very critical part of our
She doesn't have
committee.
to be part of the presentation. You can sit down. You're not part of the presentation. You sit. He's the guy. He's the guy.
Director Body has a question.
Okay.
I don't necessarily have a problem with anything, Mr. Escalera, but I just know we have policies to bid things out every 3 years. I don't want to suspend that policy. I just feel more, I don't care who gets it and how many are on the 3-year bubble or who's on the 2-year bubble or what have you. I just like to see things bidded back out for the public's sake, to know that we do go through this process.
We certainly, I will tell you, Director Body, that I had this conversation with the Material Alliances, and again, why don't I go through the presentation, and then hopefully we'll get to the game really quick. Again, with the intent of the presentation is to give the board and the senior staff and the public a quick what we have been able to do with the alliances that we have. This is just a quick agenda of what a few slides that we have will represent. Again, in 2007, Energy Department established 5 material alliances, each with the initial period of 3 years. Just for information, most utilities alliance agreements are much longer, anywhere from 5 to 8 years, depending on the type of material and alliances that they have. To give you an example, Riverside, I believe, is 8 years on their alliances. The material alliances have secured, primarily they were designed to secure supplies, provide shorter and consistent lead times. Certainly they were to adhere to control costs. At that time, we were having a difficulty with pricing as we were having to go into the market, and we were always last in line because most utilities had alliances already with these manufacturers. Although, of course, the downturn in the market didn't allow us to achieve some of our projected savings in the 3 years, what we did achieve was many improvements. Among these are, we secured a material supply to increase and maintain a service level about 99%. This is a percentage of material on hand when it's needed, when it's ordered. We have reduced our lead times. It has reduced our our inventory as level as to about $8 million. Back in 2006, Our inventory level was 24 million. What it does is it's allowed us to drastically reduce that inventory level. On the purchasing side, and we actually asked the purchasing agent to be here, Ms. Director Mendoza.
But not to be part of your presentation.
She is part of my presentation. She's part of the team. It also has reduced the smart market purchasing requirements from the buyers. They no longer need to quote materials and perform price analysis every time an item has needs to come up, as we already have price sets and market indicators with all of these alliances. New standards were created or being revised between the IID and the supply team, which reflect the latest requirements, particularly like the Department of DOC. There's a number of requirements on the transformers that the DOE has been coming up, particularly on the energy conservation side. The manufacturer takes care of all of those standards. We don't have to involve resources or additional staff to try to bring the new purchasing standards to meet these requirements. Again, we can use better use of our business tools, such as automatic POs. A lot of our orders are automatically done from our maintenance, from our material side to purchasing. It allows us to optimize lot size, which means we don't have much stock in hand. It's not quite real-time delivery, but it does help us. Oops. This is just what we wanted to just remind the crew, the board. Originally, when we were looking at the alliances, this was kind of the stock value before and after the alliances. If you look at the very last column, stock value of what we call stock material was about 15.7 million. Current stock is 7.4 million. Our target is 3.2 million. We hope to reach that as of course the economy picks up and more projects allow us to dwindle some of our own stock and rely more heavily on the alliances for them, and in other hands have the inventory sit on their side of the fence, not ours. Oops. This is just a graph kind of what originally we had projected if the economy had stayed at the level that it was at the time when these alliances were entered. We had estimated that we would have a contract value within the 3 years of about $61 million. In other words, when all of these contractors, or actually manufacturers, bid on it, it was with the anticipation that they would get about $61 million worth of business from us within about a 3-year period. Well, if we realize that hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened with many of the other customers at the utilities. And it's really, we've purchased about $10.7 million of it. In itself, if you think about it, we were able to purchase $10 million worth at $61 million worth of volume. Oops. Okay. The other thing that's very critical, and not alone just the pricing of the material, but is really the how well the supplier meets the services that we require. In other words, on-time delivery, quality acceptance, customer service. All of these are measured when the actual committee first, if you recall, did the evaluation of these submittals, and in the recent recommendation. Price only matters about 40% of the everything. What's important to us is to make sure that the quality that we get from the materials is acceptable. It doesn't vary. They're responsive to our needs. In other words, we're able to go straight to the manufacturer in many cases. We don't have to deal with a retailer. The time of deliveries, to give you an example, on poles, we have on-site delivery. The manufacturer of the wooden poles actually has a yard in El Centro, and we can require him, and at times have to actually place the poles where we need them. In other words, we don't have to go pick them up with our own resources. Many of the requirements also, for those that do have retail offices close to the valley or close to the, we've requested certain material be on hand and the type of material that we use. Should I move it or, okay. And this is where the IID Material Alliance team, which is a team made up of purchasing, stores, IID standards, our purchasing, our materials group. Did I forget anybody, Angie? Construction and maintenance makes up of this team. They have evaluated the alliances. They reviewed and discussed the pros and cons of conducting the new solicitations or going out and extending the existing alliances. What IID did, or the team did, is request a price review from all of the alliance suppliers. The suppliers then came back with a proposal averaging about a 6% reduction on the base price of the materials that had quoted within their particular alliance. We have then went out and spot checked to see how those new pricings reflected what other utilities had on their existing alliances. We found that we were anywhere from 3 or 4% higher than some areas, but in some instances, our pricing was 10 to 20% less than some of the areas. So I think that's where the committee kind of came up with it, that to go through the whole exercise of rebidding it and whatever the gain that you go through the problem, these alliances, these material suppliers have actually performed quite well. They've done everything we've asked them to. They didn't balk at the fact that originally we had anticipated we were going to buy $61 million worth of equipment material from them. In turn, we bought less than $10 million, which is about 15% of the material. Yet they've been able to meet every other standard that we set up. In other words, they've come back and lowered the base price on some of these materials. So, again,
how many alliances? How many?
5.
5?
Yes.
5. And
they're transformers, but one is pad mounts, the other one is overhead. We have the wood suppliers.
these are specialized,
Very specialized
suppliers that.
And these are with the manufacturers. They're not
Factors.
And so what one of the things that it does is that we're able to, when we get our scheduling right, what happens is Angie then puts in an order and she goes out and basically says, hey, look, 6 months from now, I'm going to need 100 of this particular transformers. It goes to the manufacturer, and that manufacturer actually bills 100 transformers for us, and that gets delivered at the date that we need it. So there's a lot of communication back and forth. They also bill to our standards. There's uniqueness in all the utilities, so they bill to that. It's a very standard practice. Once the committee got together, it was the recommendation of the committee that we extend the contract for another 3 years to let it fill itself out, since because we didn't really purchase anywhere near the amount of material that we wanted.
When does the 3 years expire?
They're kind of staggered.
Yeah, they're kind of staggered from June through November. So a couple of those already expired last June and October. So there's 5 of them. It's basically the third and fourth quarter of the year.
So who served on your committee? It's
The representatives?
Mhm.
We have Mr. Minor from Construction and Maintenance. We have Mark Eppinger from Standards. We have Dana, and one of the buyers is representing the Purchasing Department, and Mr. Bonillas from Stores, and myself as a materials planner.
And you feel comfortable that this alliance is working and you're getting the best service and the best price for the products that you need?
Absolutely. They're performing really well in regards to on-time delivery, quality assurance, customer service. There have been ups and downs as everywhere. Ourselves, we haven't been able to provide a good forecast because of the current situation, so they have really understood that. And I think that they also have the same situation across the country, so they're doing well. We're still continues to improve every day.
Well, I can understand Director Abadi's concern about going out to bid, especially like every 3 years, but since this is so specialized, it's not like you're buying automobiles or this is specialized products that I don't have a problem with extending it for another 3 years. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but to me, it's fine.
Just as an additional comment, we gave it a lot of thought. We were also considering the same, I believe, but alliances took a lot of time to set up, and
I remember
because
when
of-
you first came before the board.
Right,
yes.
and it took months for the company to start receiving the first units, the first transformers, for instance. So if you want to terminate a contract, you had to anticipate that like 6 or, I don't know, like a year before, so you prepare yourself to switch suppliers. So it's basically, because this is the first time we ever did this, so we really hadn't had enough time to really get all the benefits. And since we believe that there's still a lot to get from these firms, and that's why we're recommending the extension. It took a lot to set up these
I remember
alliances.
that,
And these are critical materials as well. It's not really a something that we can go and buy to a Home Depot or something. Those are specialized materials.
The board have any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question for Mario. Do we still have some transformers that are just old or obsolete to other people that we're still using?
Oh, yes, there's all over the system.
Yeah, so are we keeping up with that? Do we have enough rebuilt for emergency purposes?
Yes, we do. One of the things that the alliances, of course, doesn't cover every single type of transformer we have, because there is some very old transformers that are very unique to the services. So we have, and this actually falls under Angie's, because she actually takes care of all the material inside the energy department, and so we have a certain amount of material that we rebuild inside and keep as stock material. Particularly some of the rural areas out in the Winter Haven area, we keep some of the more unique system that we have. But just as a side note, if I may, Director Hanks, we're pretty much basically ready to bring the proposal on the Ana Murillo substation in the next couple of weeks. And one of the studies we did, that Angie actually did, is we looked at the performance of why we had so many transformers fail. And let's say half of them were over 30 years old.
Yeah, over 20 years.
So what we're finding out is we just have a lot of systems out there. But I think the board will be pleased with the effort that the engineering and construction staff has put together for that proposal.
I want to mention what Director Abadi brought up. It's been my experience over the years that you need to go out to bid to keep your suppliers squared up with you, and make them realize that they have to be competitive.
I had this conversation with Angie when this proposal first came up about, well, she was actually ready to bring to the board about 4 weeks ago, and we did some more research. And one of the reasons that we went is we conducted more spot market checks to see on their new proposal. In other words, we took certain items that we use a lot, take a transformer for as an example, for a particular size. Let's say that we were going to pay $800 for it. We went out and asked other utilities, on your new service agreement or your alliances, what are you paying for? Riverside was 3% higher than what we were paying for on certain ones, and some other ones that were a little less. There was a couple of utilities back east somewhere that were paying 20% more than what we were getting it for. I think we've done enough statistical look into there to add that little bit of comfort. I mean, I had the same question about it, but because we weren't able to fully exercise the alliance because of the fact we just didn't buy enough material, it's a huge effort. It takes, because you literally have to write regs and standards for it. It takes about 3 months per alliance. The team felt that since everything else was working well, that maybe looking at it at an additional 3 years, because I thought, well, let's extend it for 1, or let's extend it for 2. They kind of felt on 3 because it really kind of is the middle of the ground of what other utilities have. Like I mentioned before, some utilities have very long alliances. Not to make my answer long, but we think it'd be worthwhile for now to extend it for 3 years, and then maybe go back and say, you know what, now it's time to really go back and put all that effort and rebid it. Because there's a lot of inside of the alliances, there's a lot of matrices that compare pricing. In other words, a lot of our material is based on what raw material costs. So there's very little room for that we can't check to make sure they're not gouging us. And I looked at the same thing, and whether, for what it's worth, I thought that they did a nice job of kind of feeling that comfort that we would be okay there for now.
So are you wanting to extend the contract to the opportunity to fulfill somewhat of the old contract of the $61 million?
What we're trying to inform the board of is again that the performance, how well we've done with what we've been able to measure, and what we would like to do is just extend those alliances for another 3 years and let it play out. And
not to exceed the $61 million.
Well, there is that's a. We don't think they're going to get there. There will be no way they're going to get there. You'd have to have the market, all of a sudden, boom.
Can we put it to not to exceed the $61 million, or it comes back to fulfill the contract of before?
Excuse me, Ms. Gray, could you come answer the question since you're the purchasing agent? I think that would. Thank you, Mr. Escalera, but I think
This contract is a little bit different in nature. You charge the purchasing section with purchasing all materials that are required for the projects. So day in and day out, we fulfill inventory replenishment on a regular basis. These things are demand-driven. So as a project gets written, they add materials to the list. The SAP system analyzes all the material needs, stock on hand, and it comes out with a requisition to purchase. This alliance has already done the things that they have tried to implement. It's reduced inventory, and it's stabilized our delivery lead time, which has been a big coup. We have a shortened lead time for our critical materials, our wire and our transformers, poles. So it's already achieved that. The time that it takes to set up an agreement like this, because each single, how many items are in the contract? Do you know?
Like 100, all of them?
No, there's a lot more than that.
Yeah, a lot
I would say 1,000 items. You have to set the parameters in the system to take advantage of this so that you can automate with purchases. So the alliance contracts themselves, in theory, it isn't an amount right now. It gets fulfilled with each requisition that comes from an approved project. So even though she puts a target on there of 61, it is whatever it is because it's demand driven. So you're not approving a contract for that amount. You're approving our ability to contract with this company to stabilize the prices and the lead times and the materials.
Well, would it have came back to the board if we approached 61 million and we were going over?
No, because it's not of that nature. You are buying materials to replenish your store stock based on each approved project's needs. So it isn't like a cap amount. You are buying only for the approved projects. Initially, when the alliances first came forward, it was my suggestion to them to bring it to the board as information, because you have already given us approval to purchase materials for the stores. So it isn't a matter of coming to you to buy this code number, this code number, this code number. Our system dictates what we need, and you've given us the power to procure what we need to do those jobs. So it's really like a target that she has based on estimates for, how we've done in previous years. Of course, then the bottom fell out, and of course, that's where we are. But really to recognize the whole value of these alliances, it makes the most sense to extend them the next 3-year period. And I would say at that point, we have the experience, and they do, and it doesn't even matter for the analysis of it, they do intend the next period to go out to bid again.
Does the board have any other questions?
I hope that...
What do we?
You've answered my question. Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Mhm.
Is there any other questions from the board?
Does this violate our policy? Do we have to suspend the policy for it to continue?
I just want to add something.
No.
It doesn't, because you tell us to buy for the store materials. That's a
Because we have approved the budget amount for the budget, for these projects. So that's where the approval comes in. So the yeah, so that's where the, isn't that how
Otherwise,
it
you'd be
works?
approving it twice
Yeah.
as opposed
So,
to.
so that
the way
you're
we do it.
buying the materials for the projects that have been approved.
Right.
The alliance gives us really the best combination. And because Energy has a materials planner that assists with analyzing the different projects to make sure that they are using, like the old materials, Director Hanks, I mean, she is guiding them towards using pocket materials that might be a problem. And really, it is through us being able to work with the material planner that we are even to the point where we could recognize these kind of savings. So, I mean, it's absolutely critical for the departments to work together to make the progress that we have with this. So it's only by extending this that we're really going to gain more, just because of the way the economy turned.
So, well, all right, Dr. Hanks, do you have a question? Does the board have any other questions? This is.
Nope.
That's for information.
It's information. So we'll move on.
We are on to 2010 water.
Thank you, Mr. Escalera.
Thank you.
Purchasing agent, dash.
Move on to accept 2010 water refunding bond documents.
Number 2.
Yes.
Ken, do we have a motion?
Well,
So we open it up for
before we do
discussion?
that, I just want to clarify something. These are documents that you already approved. There was a bond refunding that already went out and closed on what date?
14th of October.
Okay.
Yeah.
All we're doing is, and we asked Mr. Hunt, and we told you that you approved these documents in substantially the same form, and Mr. Hunt explained how there might be some modifications, well, there would be, to fill in things like price and dates. We're just bringing it back to show you what got filled in. Other than receiving and review, there really isn't any action to take. I know you received a letter from Mr. Maloney. He seemed to be confused about what, if any, action you're taking and what the purpose of this is. It's a very limited purpose. He also suggested that the OS that was contained in those documents should be updated kind of like until today, but that doesn't make any sense. The OS was for the time that this transaction closed, which was
The 14th of October.
the 14th of October. So all this is just closing the loop and saying you approve these documents. Here's the way they finally ended up because things like price and date were included. File and received. There's no other form of action that we're asking for. And I think there was some confusion that was illustrated by Attorney Maloney or Attorney Versick's letter that I wanted to clarify.
I have a motion on the floor to open up for discussion. Nobody's made a motion yet.
You have a motion for what?
To accept.
I'll move to accept.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Thank you.
Did anybody have any questions?
I went over them briefly. It's stayed at 26 million, 18 from 2008 from 2002, correct? As far as the refunding.
The par amount of the bonds was 24, a little less than 25 million.
And what was
So
the
it wasn't
final
going at 30
savings?
because I remember seeing 30 before when we were talking earlier. It was up to 30, but that looked like it leveled up below.
Yes,
So
it was below
It was
that.
good. All right.
Okay.
All right, please
And
vote.
we intend to do this.
We're going to vote, Mr. Garber.
You can do your comments after the vote.
Are we voting?
Yeah, please vote. What were your comments? What?
Did you vote?
You didn't vote.
Okay, good.
Okay.
We intend to do this from now
Please
on
vote.
because it helps to see
Yeah,
the
We're next to
loop
the next
closed.
issue now. Go on, put
Wait.
the next item.
Did you get the count?
I think it was 5-0.
Next issue is item number 11, financial quality investment reports.
Dr.
Yes.
Broking.
Yes, Dr. Brady. Last week when I was here, we discussed the August financials, and sales for water and electric were down through August. It's the same case through September. Sales are still down. We think it's a combination of weather and the economy. Two things I'd just like to point out. On page 51, we've added an asterisk down at our cash balance to show that That total does not include the monies that we have up at SCAPA for the rate stabilization fund. So there's $25 million at SCAPA that aren't included in our financials, and we'll include this on a monthly basis for the board's information. And then the other thing that I just wanted to point out on page 52, we've highlighted also by asterisk the difference between the $85 and $75 for the following and what that impact would be for 2010. And that's all I had for this month.
All right, do we have a motion?
Move to accept.
We have a motion to move to accept. Do I have a second? A second, open it to discussion. If not, please vote. All right, and that concludes our meeting.